Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 3, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by Penguilicious27 on Wattpad. Now let's start. Close enough to see the metal around his neck clearly. It was a good time to test if that was a weak spot. Just as the mist was about to touch Ida, he pounced on the mist man, driving him to the ground. He pinned down what he believed to be the man's shoulders and latched his mouth onto the metal. The mist man protested, demanding to be released. He began to bite at the man's neck, causing him to cry out in distress. The metal began to bend under his teeth, and he stabbed at the mist-covered body with his tail. Although he missed most of the time, the strikes that landed caused more pain, leaving marks on his tail. The mist man declared that he would let Nomu deal with him. He then opened a portal beneath them, causing him to fall through with one thought in mind. Who was Nomu? He landed in water, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the ruins of a ship. He swam to the surface to get a better look at the destruction. Was this where his king fought? His king was becoming more powerful, and soon he wouldn't need him. But what would he do then? Izuku was the reason he had a purpose now after the destruction of his hive. What would he do if Izuku decided he didn't want him anymore? As he struggled with these thoughts, the scent of his king snapped him out of it. He began to follow the scent, swimming quickly through the water. In a few moments, he could see Izuku, 𝐒𝐮𝐬, and the small human together, looking at something. Not wanting to disturb them, he silently swam up behind them to gaze at what they were watching. One of them remarked that it was game over this time and suggested they go home. This was unexpected. Attackers never left without taking something, whether it be the lives of their enemies or their pride. They had already invested so many forces into this, making it a costly defeat. Minoru expressed disbelief, questioning if they were really going home. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 confirmed what she heard. The small human began to cry, latching onto 𝐒𝐮𝐬 for comfort. Minoru cheered, proclaiming they were safe. However, his hand placement was unusual, resting on her chest instead of around her shoulder or on her back. Was that a different variation of a hug? Why hadn't Izuku told him about that? He would need to ask someone about it later. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had a small blush on her cheeks, her eyes turning white for a moment. In an instant, she held the small human's head underwater. Should he help him? Izuku had said to protect and care for others, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 wasn't an enemy, so it was okay, right? 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressed her unease, and Izuku agreed, noting how strange it was for them to retreat after all this. He hissed in agreement, drawing their attention and causing them to jump slightly at his sudden appearance. Izuku was amazed that he had fought and won against a villain by himself. He looked at 𝐒𝐮𝐬, who was quiet, only to find her staring at him, specifically at his chest and abs. Was this a form of communication? Should he do the same? Not knowing what to do, he patted her head, which snapped her out of her trance and made her blush even more. Reaching into his pocket, he discovered nothing but mush. What happened to his snacks? He lifted the remains of his uneaten treats, and when Izuku saw them, a look of realization crossed his face. He felt tears welling up as he gazed at his fallen treats. Izuku apologized, promising to get him more snacks. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 then produced a small bag decorated with frog designs. She opened it, releasing a delicious scent that filled the air. She took out a frog-shaped cookie that seemed to have survived the water. She offered him one, and as he tasted it, he thought it was the best snack in the world. He swiftly hugged her, silently proclaiming his love for the snacks in his mind. Thank you, 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Your snacks were the best he had ever tasted, even better than the cat treats. Izuku reminded him to be quiet so they wouldn't get spotted. He realized they were in the middle of a battle. He placed 𝐒𝐮𝐬 back down, taking one more snack. She was flustered but quickly composed herself, reducing the intensity of her blush. He looked back toward the villains, now focused and satisfied from the treats. One of the villains declared that before they left, they would crush some of Izuku's pride as the symbol of peace. He appeared in front of 𝐒𝐮𝐬, extending his hand. Not knowing the nature of his attack, he opted to hold 𝐒𝐮𝐬 close while extending his arm in front of them as a shield. Everyone looked at him with worry and fear as the villain grabbed his arm, but nothing happened as Tsuyu clung to him tightly. The villain expressed frustration, acknowledging how cool he was. He glanced behind the villain to see Aizawa staring at him with red eyes, realizing how badly he was hurt. The giant dark creature slammed its head into the ground just as Izuku leaped at the human in front of them, shouting for him to let go. Izuku smashed his fist not into the human but into the dark creature. The resulting cloud of smoke allowed him to move Tsuyu and the small human to safety before returning to Izuku's side. As the smoke cleared, he found himself staring into the creature's eyes, which were focused on its 𝐒𝐮𝐬. The creature shifted its gaze from its 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to the king, attempting to grab his arm. However, I seized its wrist, digging my claws into its flesh. It turned its eyes to meet mine, and as our 𝐒𝐮𝐬s watched, we growled at each other. The king gave his order, and I felt a surge of excitement. The command was clear: to eliminate the creature. A vicious smile spread across my face, revealing my sharp teeth as I accepted the task. With a swift motion, I punched the creature, tearing a piece of its flesh away and sending it flying back. The creature, known as Nomu, rose again, and I noticed that the wound on its arm had already healed. It was clear that this battle would be a test of endurance and strength. As we approached each other, Nomu's eyes remained devoid of emotion, reflecting only blind loyalty. We were both creations of combat, and now we would see which of us would prevail in this fight. In an instant, Nomu charged at me with impressive speed, raising his fist. I ducked under the strike and sank my claws deep into his side, feeling the warmth of blood as I twisted my hand, widening the wound. Before I could launch another attack, he grabbed my arm, pulling my claws from his side. Yet, I managed to hook my claws into his flesh, tearing away a significant chunk. Nomu roared in response, lifting me by my arm and slamming me onto the ground. The impact was jarring, and he began to stomp on my chest, pushing me deeper into the earth with each blow. Amidst the chaos, I heard the king call my name, revealing he had not abandoned the battlefield. Determined to protect him, I knew I had to act quickly. As Nomu prepared to stomp again, I grabbed his leg and sliced it clean off with a powerful swipe of my claws. He toppled over, and I pulled myself free from the crater I had created. Scanning the battlefield, I saw the king still by the water, accompanied by the small human and Tsu. Aizawa lay on the ground, badly wounded and surrounded by enemies. To buy myself some time, I swiftly sliced off Nomu's other leg before rushing to Aizawa's side. The villains around him were uncertain, whispering about his condition. Before one could finish his sentence, I launched a fist into his face, sending him flying. The others hesitated, and I took advantage of their confusion, slamming their faces into the ground. Knowing Nomu would recover soon, I sprayed acid into the air, causing the villains to scatter. With little time left, I wrapped my tail around Aizawa and dashed toward the king. Upon arrival, Izuku immediately embraced me, joined by Tsu, while the small human watched Nomu with fear. I returned their embrace, but when Izuku pulled away, Tsu avoided my gaze, a blush on her face. Izuku expressed concern for my well-being, and I assured him I was fine, feeling exhilarated by the battle. I explained that Nomu reminded me of my siblings, who had challenged me in the past. Izuku seemed shocked by my words, and I glanced back at Nomu, noticing his legs were almost fully healed. I cradled both Izuku and Tsu in my arms, lifting the small human by his diaper with my tail. I jumped a considerable distance from the battle just in time, as Nomu's legs had healed completely. Once I landed, I gently set them down before handing over Aizawa and the small human. Izuku cautioned me to be careful and not to act recklessly. I nodded, giving him a quick hug before embracing Tsu and the unconscious Aizawa. Tsu wished me luck, wrapping her arms around me tightly before pulling away to give me one of her snacks. Eager to return to the fight, I quickly ate the snack, my mind racing with thoughts of what awaited me. Determined to win, I dashed back to Nomu, who now displayed a new emotion, anger. He slammed his fists into the ground, pulling out 2 massive pieces of concrete. I charged at him, intent on finishing the fight. He threw one of the pieces at me, which I dodged easily. The second piece, however, struck me, causing a jolt of pain to shoot through my knee. The impact shattered the chitin on my knee, and as BLD spilled, I staggered but refused to fall. Another blow hit my other knee, forcing me down to my hands and knees. I realized too late that the villains had brought weapons with them. The mist-covered man approached, observing me as I waited for my knees to heal. He expressed surprise at my resilience, but another villain interrupted, suggesting I could be of use. The battle was far from over, and I was determined to prove my strength. It was as strong, if not stronger, than Nomu. All they needed to do was teach it obedience. A pet like this could suit them nicely. Nomu was instructed to bring it in, using force if it resisted. The rest of the villains were to assist Nomu in capturing it. As Nomu and the remaining villains approached, the thought of subjugation ignited a fierce defiance. The character would never become someone else's prisoner. They would have to drag their lifeless body back if they expected compliance. Anger surged at the mere thought of becoming one of their mindless soldiers, and they shakily rose to their feet. A gun user took another shot, but the character dodged, the bullet striking the ground behind them. They staggered slightly, their knees still recovering from previous injuries. The villains noted the resistance. It seemed the character would make a fine addition to their league. Hissing defiantly, they felt their knees finally heal, allowing them to move without issue. Nomu lunged to grab them, but the character ducked under his arms and slashed at his side, feeling the satisfaction of their claws coated in BLD red was a striking color, after all. Activating their fire quirk, the character's claws glowed bright red, evaporating the BLD as they engaged the surrounding villains. Their claws cut through the enemies with ease, filling the air with the scent of burning flesh. Many villains fled, while a few foolishly chose to stay and fight. However, the character's momentum was interrupted when Nomu wrapped his arms around them, trapping their arms to their sides. In a moment of desperation, the character bit into Nomu's arm and stabbed his stomach with their tail, causing more BLD to spill. His grip loosened just enough for them to slip out and onto his back, where they slammed his head into the ground. Looking around, they noticed the remaining villains were either incapacitated or retreating. The battle was turning in their favor. Nomu pulled his head from the ground and retaliated with a powerful punch, breaking some of the character's chitin plates. They staggered back but quickly hissed and charged at him. He raised his arms defensively as they slashed at him, cutting through flesh that struggled to regenerate due to the ongoing quirk. Nomu soon abandoned defense, grabbing the character's arms and slamming them into the ground. Before they could recover, he began to punch their elbows, breaking the chitin there while still holding them down. With each strike, the chitin began to repair and strengthen, dulling the pain. Using their tail, the character stabbed him in the stomach and threw him a few feet away. As they got back up, Nomu charged again, hand raised to strike. The character dodged, but he anticipated their move, latching onto them. He pierced their skin and bit into their shoulder, holding them in place. Grinning, the character grabbed his arm and head, pushing them further into their wounds. Their BLD made contact with him, and he roared in pain, trying to free himself from the corrosive substance. The character released him, watching as he fell back, his hand now a stump and his mouth gone. The shock on Nomu's face was evident, as well as that of the two remaining villains. The character approached him, their wounds rapidly healing and strengthening. This was where they differed from Nomu. While he got hurt and regenerated, they grew stronger with each injury. Fear flickered in his eyes as the characters stabbed their tail into his leg, pulling him closer. He attempted to crawl away, but he was too weakened to escape. They proceeded to deliver a fatal bite to his exposed brain, ending his threat, but just as they did, something struck them in the head. A few minutes earlier, Izuku and his friends were carrying Mr. Aizawa after the character had gone off to confront Nomu and the other villains. Izuku knew the character was capable of handling themselves, but worry not at him. Minoru expressed admiration for the character, curious about how Izuku had met them. So you also wanted to know. Izuku explained that he had encountered the character in an alleyway, where they had been much smaller, about the size of a puppy. He had shared a snack with them, and they had taken an instant liking to him. Tsuyu asked if the character attacked anything, and Izuku realized that they only attacked those who harmed him physically or emotionally. They acted as a protective guard dog, he mused, but he doubted the character would let anyone else ride on their back. Suddenly, a loud bang interrupted their conversation, followed by a roar that sounded like the character in pain. Another shot rang out, and Izuku's heart raced with fear. He began to run back to where the character was fighting, dread filling his mind. As he neared the scene, he saw the character above Nomu, finishing him off with a decisive bite. But then another shot echoed, and the character fell onto their back, unmoving. Izuku stopped in shock, his heart shattering at the sight. His best friend lay still, eyes closed. The blue-haired villain turned to the shooter, scolding him for killing instead of capturing. Izuku remained frozen, staring at the character, his one true friend, lifeless before him. Tears streamed down my face as I realized 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was not there to comfort me. A voice broke through my despair, instructing 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to take the body with us. That snapped me out of my shock, and I turned my gaze away from 𝐒𝐮𝐬's still form. Couldn't let them take him. With determination, I rushed toward 𝐒𝐮𝐬, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 blocked my path. Just as I reached out, he was slammed to the ground. I opened my eyes slightly and saw 𝐒𝐮𝐬 in front of Izuku. I quickly rose and grabbed 𝐒𝐮𝐬's neck, slamming him down. Izuku looked at me, tears flowing from his green eyes. I tossed the mist villain aside and embraced Izuku, who clung to me, crying as I rubbed his head and back. The creature that had caused so many memories to flood back made me feel faint. Shigaraki, watching us, expressed his growing frustration. Sensing danger, I moved Izuku behind me, raising my arm to shield us just in time as Shigaraki grabbed my forearm. The decay spread rapidly, causing excruciating pain that made me roar in agony. Izuku cried out for me, and in a desperate act to save myself, I severed my arm, blood spraying everywhere. Shigaraki recoiled, and I took advantage of the moment, shaking my arm to send my acidic blood around us. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 intervened, creating a portal that absorbed my blood. My arm quickly regenerated, thanks to the quirks I had taken from Nomu, but I noticed my severed arm had vanished, a relief considering the decay. Shigaraki, frustrated by the absence of all might and the loss of Nomu, extended his hand toward me, prompting me to back up while still holding Izuku tightly. He declared that I would be a perfect replacement for Nomu and that he needed to eliminate my current MSTR to make me obey. Before he could reach Izuku, a bullet struck his hand, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. With the battle turning in our favor, I felt a surge of hope. Izuku clung to me, still shaken from the earlier chaos. I wrapped my tail around him for comfort as I focused on the remaining villains. Shigaraki realized the tide had turned, and as bullets struck him, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 shielded him with his body. I seized the opportunity to grab Nomu's lifeless form and retreat. Shigaraki glared at me, but I held up the body triumphantly, declaring it my trophy. 13 used her quirk to pull the villains toward the heroes, but Shigaraki vowed to return for me, insisting I would make a perfect replacement for Nomu. I glared back, spitting acid at them, but they vanished before it could reach them. With the enemy still fixated on me, I realized they would also target Izuku. However, with Nomu's memories, I might locate their base and strike first. Izuku's voice broke through my thoughts, filled with sadness and fear. I turned to him, dropping Nomu's body and pulling him into a comforting hug. He wrapped his arms around my neck, crying into my shoulder. He thought I had died. I reassured him that I had only stopped moving due to the overwhelming memories I absorbed. The bullet that struck my head had shattered on contact, leaving me unharmed. This explanation calmed him slightly, and as I lay down, still holding him, I gently rocked us with my tail while rubbing his head. Eventually, he fell asleep in my arms. I pondered how to comfort him after such a traumatic experience. Perhaps some delicious snacks and a warm bed would help. With that thought in mind, I stood up, securing Izuku in one arm while lifting Nomu's body with the other. Suddenly, a voice commanded me to drop the body. I hadn't noticed a few humans approaching us while I was lost in thought. The 3 humans were dressed in blue clothing with black vests, and their loud voices made me consider them potential threats. With Izuku asleep, he was vulnerable and they were getting too close for comfort. one of the humans shouted for me to drop the body. When he placed his hand on my arm, holding Nomu, I finally retaliated. I wrapped my tail around Nomu and used my free hand to shove the human away. To my surprise, he was launched several feet back. I hadn't used that much strength. Perhaps these humans were simply weaker than I expected. Or maybe Nomu's strength, combined with his quirks, contributed to my own. That seemed likely. The remaining 2 humans looked shocked and quickly got into combat positions. Before I could take further action, All Might approached and placed his hand on one of the human's shoulders, interrupting him. He greeted them with a smile, asking what the problem was. The human explained that I had refused to drop the body and had assaulted an officer. All Might turned to me, disappointment evident in his eyes. He reminded me that there was no excuse for lashing out, especially at an officer. I explained that I had a reason for my actions. The human had attempted to give me an order and touched my arm, which made me feel threatened, especially with Izuku asleep and vulnerable. I was on high alert until Izuku woke up. I also mentioned that Izuku always warned me about stranger danger, so I reacted to protect both of us. All Might sighed and leaned in to whisper that we would discuss this later. For now, he would distract the officers while I made my escape. He advised me to leave the body behind to avoid any reports of suspicious activity. I tilted my head in confusion, wondering what was suspicious about a body that wasn't even human. Amused, All Might patted my head and offered me a treat, which I gladly accepted, still puzzled by his words. Once I finished the snack, he turned the 2 humans around and began to walk away with them, asking them to assist him in securing the area. They stopped protesting and followed him to search for any remaining threats or injured students. It was time for me to go home and make Izuku feel better. I dropped Nomu's body but wasn't going to leave without a trophy to show my victory. Using my sharp claws, I took his head, letting some blood pool around the body. I grabbed the severed head and ran toward the exit, ensuring I held Izuku tightly. Despite my speed, he remained peacefully asleep in my arms. I wondered what food would be worthy of my king. Perhaps Inko could help me with this task once we returned home. Moments later, we exited and found the rest of the class outside. I skidded to a halt, slightly breaking the concrete beneath my feet. The noise caught the attention of Ishido, Tsuyu, and Uraraka, who ran and tackled me in a group hug. Thanks to my strength, I managed to remain standing as I wrapped my tail around them, returning the embrace. They expressed their concern, asking if I was all right and if I had been injured during the fight. I tried to reassure them with a smile and a nod, but they began checking my body for wounds. When they touched my sides, it tickled, causing me to chuckle slightly. They stared at me wide-eyed, having never heard me make a sound other than growls or hisses. I noticed Mina smirking as she began to tickle my sides. It took a lot of effort to hold back my laughter, but I managed to keep Izuku safe in my arms. Tsuyu and Uraraka watched, intrigued to see if Mina could make me laugh. Mina teased me, asking if I was ticklish. She continued her playful assault, and I gave her a defiant look, trying to suppress my laughter. Using my tail, I wrapped around her hand and lifted her away, finally ending her tickling. Just then, Izuku opened his eyes and looked at me, confused about his surroundings until he remembered what had happened. He asked if I was okay and if I had any injuries. As he got out of my arms to check on me, I chuckled again when he touched my sides. Mina, still hanging in the air by my tail, asked where he had come from. Izuku explained that I had been carrying him and questioned why Mina was suspended in midair. She explained her tickling attempt, and Izuku asked me to put her down, which I did gently. I sat beside him, using my tail to hide Nomu's head from view. Achiko remarked on how obedient I was to Izuku, who gently rubbed my head as I leaned into his hand, purring. He asked if the others were okay, and Tsuyu confirmed that I had fought off most of the villains, ensuring none came after them. She noted my determination, especially against the creature that had tried to attack Izuku. With a smile and happiness in his eyes, Izuku praised me for my efforts, saying he was proud of me. His words nearly brought tears to my eyes, but I held them back. Seeing my emotional state, Izuku giggled and opened his arms wide, inviting me into a hug. I quickly wrapped my arms around him and lifted him up, causing a small laugh to escape from him. Everyone else watched, amused, as I danced in place with Izuku in my arms, my tail wagging. My king is proud of me. I felt a sense of fulfillment, but I knew I couldn't leave Izuku alone just yet. If only my family could see me now, stronger than before and caring for someone so kind. Before we could start our journey home, Izuku insisted we walk together instead of me getting us there almost instantly. So here we were, walking home side by side, with Izuku holding my leash as I walked on all fours beside him. He mentioned that sometimes, one has to stop and appreciate the little things in life. There was a huge collection of flowers to our left, so I stopped and stared. Izuku came to a halt, confused about why I had stopped. I approached the flowers and buried my face in a vibrant cluster. They were bright red and smelled of lemons. Izuku lightly tugged on my leash, making me return to his side with 4 flowers stuck in my hair. He giggled before carefully removing the flowers and placing them back. He explained that appreciating the little moments that bring us joy is important, like our walk home together. I shared that being with him, even just laying by his feet, brought me great joy. I was grateful he found me all those years ago. He seemed surprised by my answer, but soon a smile replaced that surprise as he crouched down and hugged me. We continued our peaceful walk back home, smiles on our faces. Joy was a word I wasn't too familiar with, but the time I spent with Izuku had given me a clearer understanding of it. Hopefully he would teach me more. We arrived home shortly after, as the sun was setting, casting an orange glow around us. Izuku opened the door and let go of my leash, allowing me to run inside and wait for him in the living room. He smiled while closing the door and taking off his shoes, announcing that we were home. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 soon came out of the kitchen with a bowl that had my name on it, filled with perfectly cooked meat and rice. She placed the bowl in front of me, and I immediately began to devour the contents. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 rubbed my head before walking back to get Izuku's food. My king went to his room to change as I finished cleaning my bowl. I decided to save my plan to cheer up Izuku for another time. He seemed to be doing all right, but I would keep an eye out for anything. I got up with my bowl and made my way to the kitchen to wash it. Izuku soon came out of his room and into the kitchen as I began to wash my bowl. He was already halfway done with his food when 𝐒𝐮𝐬 started speaking with him. She asked how school was for them that day. Izuku stuttered out a response, and I decided to help him explain the day to his mother. I reassured him that I would explain everything. He signaled me not to, but it was too late. I had already revealed my tail, which had been wrapped around 𝐒𝐻𝐬's head. They both stopped and stared in shock. The silence stretched on until the head fell, causing them to faint onto the table. I noted that they must be tired and decided to take care of them. I placed the head on the floor before moving to the table and picking 𝐒𝐮𝐬 up in my arms. I made my way to her room, using my tail to open the door and pull the sheets back from her bed. I gently laid her down and tucked her in, nudging her head with mine like my mother used to do when putting me and my siblings to sleep. I quietly left the room and closed the door before heading to the kitchen for Izuku. He was still passed out, so I picked him up in my arms and took him to his room. I opened the door with my tail and pulled the covers off his bed before gently laying him down. I covered him with the blankets once more, hugging him and rubbing my head against his. I left the room, leaving the door slightly open, as I planned to return to guard him once I finished securing their food. In the kitchen, I saw 𝐻𝐬's head still on the floor. I asked it if it was still angry about what had happened, but it didn't respond. I wondered where it had been made, but again, there was no answer. I decided that perhaps more practice speaking could help. I grabbed both of their plates of food and opened the cold box's door with my tail, placing the food inside. Once it was safe, I closed the door and picked up 𝐻𝐬's head before heading back to Izuku's room. I wondered if 𝐻𝐬 wanted to know something. I mentioned that its brain had tasted strange, a mix of different things. I noted that its 𝐒𝐮𝐬s were now hunting me and Izuku, and I had to find and stop them to keep my king safe. I opened the door to Izuku's room and quietly closed it behind me. He was still asleep, so I rolled the head under the bed before climbing into bed with my king. He unconsciously turned and hugged my tail as I patted his head. I wondered what tomorrow would have in store for us. Izuku later told me that we didn't have school for a while because of the recent attack, So we found ourselves in his room, me relaxing while he lifted a dumbbell, one hand on the weight and the other gently rubbing my head as I curled up on his bed. A knock on the door interrupted their moment, prompting 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to call out to them. She opened the door, revealing a warm smile as she announced that dinner was ready. Izuku thanked her, and with a gesture he encouraged 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to follow him. Eager for 𝐒𝐮𝐬's delicious cooking, they left the room together. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 cheerfully announced that they would be having pork cutlet bowls for dinner. As 𝐒𝐮𝐬 savored the meal, the flavors were nothing short of heavenly. Later, they found themselves in homeroom, where 𝐒𝐮𝐬 sat comfortably by Izuku's feet, enjoying the gentle affection of his hand on their head. The chatter around them faded as they relished the moment, almost drifting off to sleep. However, a loud voice broke the tranquility, startling them awake. Minoru was causing a ruckus, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 decided to respond playfully by extending their tail. When Minoru continued to complain, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 playfully swatted him with their tail, finally bringing silence to his antics. Izuku, concerned about the commotion, looked at 𝐒𝐮𝐬 with a mix of surprise and seriousness. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 explained it was just a reflex, and they took his hand, placing it back on their head while gazing up at him with innocent eyes. Izuku's expression softened, and he resumed petting 𝐒𝐮𝐬, a small smile forming as he muttered to himself about their cuteness. Rikido praised 𝐒𝐮𝐬 for their impressive display of strength against the villains, noting how they had handled the situation remarkably well. While 𝐒𝐮𝐬 appreciated the compliment, they knew that most of the villains were not a challenge for them, with only a few posing a real threat. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 agreed, acknowledging 𝐒𝐮𝐬's strength. Rikido then asked Izuku about 𝐒𝐮𝐬's species, drawing the attention of the entire class, including Katsuki. The question piqued everyone's curiosity, and Izuku hesitated to answer. Before he could respond, Iida rushed to the front of the class, urging everyone to take their seats as homeroom was about to begin. His insistence on order was met with some playful banter from their classmates. After Iida settled down, the class returned to their discussions, momentarily forgetting about the earlier question. Izuku sighed in relief and continued to pet 𝐒𝐮𝐬 while sharing a snack with them. As the class settled, a familiar scent wafted through the air, drawing 𝐒𝐮𝐬's attention to the door. Tsuyu mentioned that Mr. Aizawa was supposed to be recovering in the hospital. Just then, the door opened, and Aizawa entered, prompting a chorus of surprised greetings from the students. Despite his bandaged appearance, Aizawa quickly shifted the focus back to the upcoming 𝐒𝐮 Sports Festival, emphasizing its importance. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 stood up, ready for action, but Izuku held onto their leash to keep them calm. Aizawa explained that the festival was a chance for the students to showcase their skills and that preparations should not be taken lightly. While the others buzzed with excitement about the festival, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 reflected on their own motivations for being there. They were not aspiring to be a hero, their loyalty lay with Izuku, and they would follow him no matter the path he chose. As the conversation about the festival continued, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noticed a quiet classmate with a unique appearance, reminiscent of a rock. Curiosity piqued, they turned their attention to him. Izuku remarked on the enthusiasm of their classmates, while Iida passionately encouraged everyone to get excited about their future as heroes. Tsuyu pointed out Iida's unique way of expressing enthusiasm, which brought a smile to 𝐒𝐮𝐬's face as they moved closer to Tsu and Ishido. The two welcomed 𝐒𝐮𝐬 with affectionate gestures, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬's gaze remained fixed on the quiet student, Kuda, who seemed shy under their scrutiny. He reminded 𝐒𝐮𝐬 of Izuku in a way, so it seemed likely that he would enjoy hugs as well. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 turned back to Tsuyu and nodded. Tsuyu observed that he seemed really shy, which might mean there wouldn't be much conversation. With a burst of energy, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 got up and hugged both of them, lifting them into the air. They returned the embrace, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noticed a hint of red on their cheeks as they continued. Izuku then announced that they were heading to lunch, prompting 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to gently place both of them down and pat their heads before following him to the cafeteria. As they walked away, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noticed the blush on their cheeks deepening. As they made their way to the cafeteria, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 carried Izuku on their back while he chatted with Uraraka and Iida. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was only half listening, catching snippets about Uraraka wanting to become a heroine to help her parents. It was a noble cause, 𝐼/N thought, but their own motivation for being there was solely for Izuku, without any intention to help others. Ida's loud clapping broke 𝐼/N's train of thought. He cheered for Uraraka, and though 𝐼/N didn't understand the reason for his enthusiasm, they joined in, clapping louder and faster, causing the sound to echo. Uraraka thanked them for the applause just as All Might came running around the corner. All Might announced that Izuku and 𝐼/N were there, to which Izuku responded with curiosity about what was happening. All Might held up a blue cloth covering a box in one hand and a small bag of treats in the other, inviting them to eat together. Izuku expressed his eagerness to join, but 𝐼/N mentioned wanting to do something else. Although 𝐼/N couldn't see Izuku's face from their position, they felt his grip tighten slightly, and his voice had a different tone. Izuku asked what 𝐼/N planned to do, and 𝐼/N explained they wanted to inspect something that had caught their attention earlier. Izuku got off 𝐼/N's back, offering a closed-eye smile and assuring them to be safe before quickly leaving with All Might. 𝐼/N watched them go, slightly puzzled by Izuku's change in demeanor, realizing he was eager to spend time with his role model. With that thought, 𝐼/N decided it was time to find the rock human. As 𝐼/N walked toward the cafeteria, they were unaware of another human watching from around the corner of the hallway. Passing several students, 𝐼/N noticed the strange looks they received. Ida was a little ahead, conversing with Uraraka, who held 𝐼/N's leash. While they talked, 𝐼/N observed the humans around for potential powers to relieve them of, but they recalled Izuku's order not to harm anyone and were determined not to disappoint him again. Regardless of Izuku's presence, 𝐼/N knew they shouldn't disobey his orders. Insubordination was not tolerated. Lost in thought, 𝐼/N didn't realize they had entered the cafeteria until Uraraka gently rubbed their head. She asked if 𝐼/N was okay, noting they seemed deep in thought. Her hand was soft and warm, prompting 𝐼/N to lean into her palm and purr. She giggled and began to rub 𝐼/N's head and face with both hands. Ida moved ahead, leaving them alone. In that moment of bliss, a group of humans passed by, and one with yellow hair whispered something derogatory. Though 𝐼/N caught a glimpse of his face before he turned away, they decided to remember it in case they encountered him alone later. He laughed as he walked off with his friends, but 𝐼/N was unfazed by his comment. Uraraka, however, looked down, clearly embarrassed. Normally, 𝐼/N wouldn't concern themselves with a human's feelings, except for Izuku, but Uraraka had earned their favor through her kindness. It was time to initiate Operation Care and Scare, a plan meant for Izuku but one 𝐼/N could make an exception for this time. The first step was to tend to the human's emotional pain. Standing tall, 𝐼/N lifted Uraraka into a comforting hug. She stiffened at first but gradually relaxed, hugging 𝐼/N tightly and burying her face in their neck as 𝐼/N stroked her hair. Another group of humans passed by, and instead of making rude comments, they expressed admiration. This seemed to bring Uraraka back to reality, and she gently pushed herself off 𝐼/N's chest, causing 𝐼/N to adjust their arms around her waist. With a bright blush on her face, Uraraka smiled widely and thanked 𝐼/N. 𝐼/N nuzzled her cheek, deepening her blush. Now that she seemed emotionally better, it was time for the second step, addressing the source of her pain. Gently placing her back on the ground, 𝐼/N began walking in the direction the blonde human had gone, which confused Uraraka. She asked where 𝐼/N was going, and 𝐼/N paused, considering how to respond. They couldn't reveal their intention to confront the blonde human, as Uraraka might tell Izuku. Using their tail, 𝐼/N gestured toward the line of humans and rubbed their stomach, prompting Uraraka to deduce that 𝐼/N was hungry. She exclaimed that 𝐼/N must be hungry and suggested they check with Tsuyu, who might still have some snacks. Uraraka grabbed 𝐼/N's leash and pointed to a table where Mina and Tsuyu were engrossed in conversation. As they walked over, 𝐼/N noticed the plates of food in front of them, reminding 𝐼/N that Uraraka hadn't had lunch yet. I looked ahead to see a human with a plate that had an uneaten burger on it. It was perfect, untouched, and should be easy to acquire. The human was currently trying to open a bag, struggling with it as he fell under the table. I took this chance to stealthily take the plate as we walked by. Meat is a great source of food for any growing human, and it wasn't stealing since I wasn't caught. What other items should I relieve these humans of? A human passed by us, holding a delicious yellow triangle. I used my tail to tap her shoulder, making her turn away from us. This allowed me to grab the triangle and place it on my plate while she looked around, confused. A delicious triangle. The meal was almost complete. Now I just needed something for her to drink. We were almost at Tsu's and Mina's table when a human sitting nearby stood up and spoke to another human who was absorbed in a book. I noticed several empty water bottles near his plate, with only one still full and unopened. The human announced he was going to the bathroom and left, leaving his beverage unguarded since the other human was busy reading. As we passed, I swiftly grabbed the bottle with my tail and moved it to my left hand while holding the plate in my right. Hold on, I thought. Not only had I completed the meal, but I also hadn't been detected. Achiko greeted us, her voice drawing their attention and ending their conversation in favor of warm smiles. Mina turned to me, her smile growing as her eyes sparkled with excitement. I still needed to investigate her strange scent. Maybe I would find an answer during this time. Mina greeted me, and I let out a hiss before giving her a small smile. We sat down with them in different spots. 𝐒𝐬 was in a chair while I preferred to sit on the floor next to Tsu, still holding the tray. Tsu greeted us and rubbed my head, causing me to purr slightly as I leaned into her hand with my eyes closed. Mina asked 𝐒𝐬 where her lunch was, and 𝐒𝐬 realized she had forgotten to get it. I opened my eyes and placed the plate of food on the table in front of her, along with the unopened water bottle. They looked at the items before turning to me, and I looked up at them with hopeful eyes, my tail wagging in anticipation. When no one said anything, I thought they must not have liked it. My thoughts were interrupted as all three of them tackled me into a group hug, exclaiming how cute I was. The hug took me by surprise, but I quickly wrapped my tail and arms around all three of them. The hug didn't last long, as 𝐒𝐬's stomach growled, making her pull away with a blush on her face. She apologized, admitting she was still a little hungry. Both Mina and Tsu giggled as I unwrapped myself from the embrace and picked 𝐒𝐬 up with my tail. She panicked slightly as she was lifted off her feet but soon relaxed as I sat her down in her chair, moving the plate of food closer to her. Mina and 𝐼𝐻ido sat back down in their chairs while I returned to my spot next to Tsu, resting my head on her lap. 𝐒𝐬 thanked me and asked how I had gotten the food since they hadn't gone near the lunch line. I shrugged, indicating that I had liberated it from careless humans. Tsu took out her homemade snacks and fed them to me while 𝐼𝐻ido ran her fingers through my hair. I recalled that I needed to investigate 𝐼𝐻ido's strange scent. I called out to 𝐼𝐻ido, making her jump as her eyes landed on me. She asked what I wanted, and I continued, explaining that her scent was pleasing but had a hint of acidity that confused me. A light blush appeared on her cheeks as she asked why it confused me. I explained that in my experience, humans couldn't come into contact with acid without harm, so I was curious about her scent. She clarified that it was just her quirk, but the more she used it, the less resistance she had to it. I reassured her that it smelled good to me, reminding me of home, which was relaxing. Tsu then asked who I was talking to, stopping our conversation. Mina explained that I could speak telepathically, a strange feeling at first, but one would get used to it. 𝐒𝐬 looked at me with wonder, amazed by my ability. I confirmed that I could speak telepathically, and 𝐒𝐬 reacted with surprise, holding her head as she looked at 𝐼𝐻ido. Tsu asked what was strange, and I explained that it was me speaking to them in their minds. She held her head, processing the information. I requested that she continue rubbing my head, as it produced a calming feeling. Soon, they all returned to what they were originally doing as I enjoyed the treats and head rubs. Class ended, and I followed behind Izuku, who held my leash. As we walked to the door, I sensed several new scents that put me on edge. Izuku noticed my uneasy stance right away and crouched down next to me, asking what was the matter. I gestured toward the door just as 𝐒𝐬 opened it. The new scents revealed several students gathered outside the classroom, all staring at them. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐸 wondered if this was an attack and asked if they should confront the students, but Izuku signaled for them to stay hidden, prompting 𝐒𝐮 to use their invisibility quirk. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressed confusion about what was happening, while Tenya questioned the students' intentions with class. Minoru exclaimed that they couldn't get out. Although 𝐒𝐮 could easily clear a path through the crowd, Izuku had already denied the request for violence. Minoru then asked why they had come. Katsuki explained that they were scouting the enemy, having survived a previous villain attack, and assumed the other students wanted to observe them before the sports festival. The students outside were both clever and foolish. They sought to gather information but chose a rather bold approach. Katsuki stood before them, radiating confidence, which made the others visibly nervous. He dismissed them, calling them extras, prompting Tenya to defend the students and criticize Katsuki's attitude. A student with purple hair, resembling Aizawa, stepped forward and commented on the arrogance of Class A. He expressed disappointment, noting that many students had enrolled in general studies after failing to enter the hero course. 𝐒𝐮 thought that the failure to qualify only meant those students weren't good enough, unlike Izuku, who would surpass everyone. The purple-haired student continued, mentioning that the school had given them a chance to transfer into the hero course based on their performance in the sports festival. 𝐒𝐮 felt a surge of protectiveness and began to approach the student, careful not to reveal their position. The student declared that if Class A got too carried away, he would take them down, framing it as a declaration of war. This declaration amused 𝐒𝐮, who decided to accept the challenge, silently vowing to ensure that those who threatened them would not succeed. Izuku appeared slightly frightened, prompting 𝐒𝐮 to growl softly, causing the others to look around in confusion. The purple-haired student then inquired about 𝐒𝐮, referring to them as a savage animal and a class pet. Izuku quickly defended 𝐒𝐮, asserting that they were his best friend, while 𝐒𝐮 added that 𝐒𝐮 was caring. The student continued, reminding them of 𝐒𝐮's past actions against villains, suggesting that 𝐒𝐮 could become a danger if they ever stopped listening to Izuku. Izuku was taken aback, recalling how 𝐒𝐮 had always been gentle and protective, never harming him. He remembered how 𝐒𝐮 would comfort him when he was sad, always looking out for him. Izuku then called out to 𝐒𝐮, who responded in his mind. When Izuku mentioned a jump scare, everyone looked at him curiously. 𝐒𝐮 complied, and as their invisibility faded, they revealed themselves, eyes filled with intensity and a grin on their face. The sudden appearance startled the students, causing some to activate their quirks. The purple-haired student fell back, crawling away in fear. 𝐒𝐮 let out a small amount of acid in their direction, causing the students to scream and flee. Feeling a rush of exhilaration from their reaction, 𝐒𝐮 returned to Izuku, their expressions softening into a smile. Izuku praised 𝐒𝐮 for their display, suggesting they head home to prepare. As they left, 𝐒𝐮 waved goodbye to Tsu, Ishido, and Uraraka, who returned the gesture with smiles. Wrapping their tail around Izuku, they dashed out of the school, ready to prepare for the upcoming challenge. With war declared, 𝐒𝐮 was determined to strike first with a swift and powerful approach. They had 2 weeks to prepare, and the familiar thrill of battle filled them with excitement. During the first week, 𝐒𝐮 assisted Izuku in training, helping him improve while also caring for him when he was tired. Izuku and 𝐒𝐮 were in his room, with Izuku lying on his stomach on the bed, shirtless. 𝐒𝐮 was giving him a muscle massage, using one of their quirks to warm their hands. 𝐒𝐮 asked if Izuku was comfortable, to which he replied that the massage was really helping his sore muscles. As 𝐒𝐮 lightly pressed down on his spine, a pop resonated through the room, causing Izuku to let out a sound of surprise. He quickly covered his mouth, and 𝐒𝐮 tilted their head in confusion but continued the massage. After a moment, Izuku announced he was going to take a shower and thanked 𝐒𝐮 for the massage. He got up, grabbed some clean clothes, and headed toward the bathroom. 𝐒𝐮 saw this as the perfect opportunity to search for villains. 𝐒𝐮 asked if they could go outside for a while. Izuku paused, thinking, and then agreed, reminding 𝐒𝐮𝐬 to return before it got too dark and to avoid causing trouble. He mentioned that the police were getting tired of responding to reports of a giant creature causing chaos. Once Izuku left, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 stood up and exited the room, removing their leash as they walked toward the entrance. They planned a quick 30-minute search to locate anything related to the League of Villains. 𝐒𝐬𝐬's memories had only provided vague images of a factory and creatures stored within. Dropping the leash next to the door, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 opened it to see the appealing orange glow of the setting sun. Time was limited, so they dashed outside, ensuring the door was locked behind them. They began jumping from rooftop to rooftop, venturing deeper into the city in search of clues. Over the past week, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had discovered that 𝐒𝐬𝐬's quirks had enhanced their own natural strength, speed, and durability. 𝐒𝐬𝐬 had been designed to face All Might at full power, yet 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had managed to defeat him with relative ease. Perhaps it was because 𝐒𝐬𝐬 wasn't meant to contend with someone like 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Regardless, they felt confident that they could take on All Might, but that was a concern for another time. Landing on a tall building, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 took a moment to sniff the air, searching for the sense of the mist man or the hands human. However, they didn't recognize the smells or sights of the area. It seemed they had wandered into a different part of the city. How long had they been traveling? Before they could ponder further, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 caught the sense of both the mist man and the hands human nearby. Determined not to lose their trail, they sprinted across the rooftops toward the source of the scents, which led them to what appeared to be an abandoned bar. This was where the scents converged, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 wondered why they were here. It wasn't their place to question, their task was to act without hesitation. As 𝐒𝐮𝐬 approached the door, preparing for a confrontation, they sensed someone behind them but continued forward. Suddenly, a grunt echoed, and they were grabbed and slammed against the side of a building. A voice demanded all their money, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 looked up to see a giant hand gripping them, attached to a hooded figure. Confused by his appearance, 𝐒𝐮𝐬's silence seemed to infuriate the man. He squeezed tighter, prompting a growl of discomfort from 𝐒𝐮𝐬. The man repeated his demand, threatening them once more. In response, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 jabbed their tail into his hand, causing him to scream in pain and release his grip. The man quickly recovered, morphing his hand back to normal before claws emerged at his fingertips. He declared that 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had chosen to fight back and charged at them with his clawed hand raised, ready to strike. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 sidestepped the attack and tripped him, sending him crashing face-first into a trash can. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 remarked that if he intended to attack, he shouldn't make it so obvious. The man, shocked at the unexpected response, quickly shifted to anger. He rose and transformed his remaining arm into a giant tentacle with barbs, attempting to WT 𝐒𝐮𝐬. Even if he managed to hit, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 doubted it would penetrate their skin. As they dodged, they noticed the sun was nearly gone, and Izuku had advised returning home before it got too late. Determined to finish this quickly, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 seized the man's arm and, with a swift motion, incapacitated him. The man screamed in agony, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬 pressed on, undeterred. As he transformed his other arm into that of a tiger, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 allowed the claws to strike, feeling no pain as they made contact. Grabbing him by the neck, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 lifted him off the ground, their claws digging in. They expressed that they would apologize if they felt remorse, but they didn't. The man struggled to look up just in time to see 𝐒𝐮𝐬 unleash a final attack, ending the confrontation. With the threat neutralized, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 glanced up at the sky, realizing the sun had finally set. They felt a pang of disappointment at not being able to confront the others today, but there would always be another opportunity. As 𝐒𝐮𝐬 began their journey home, they followed the scent trail they had left behind. During the trip, a sudden headache struck, and they felt their muscles cramp before it subsided. It was a new sensation, and they hoped it wouldn't happen again, uncertain of its cause. Fortunately, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 soon found themselves outside Izuku's home, relieved that they wouldn't have to travel any further. Entering the house, they made their way to Izuku's room, a single thought lingering in their mind. They needed to prepare for battle, as it had been years since they last participated in any conflict. 2 weeks passed quickly, And during that time, intense training consumed our days, though I wasn't sure it was helping me. I sat next to Izuku as he tied his shoes, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 expressed her concern, reminding both Izuku and me to be careful and not get hurt. Izuku nodded in response, finishing his task and reattaching my leash to my collar. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 mentioned she would record our efforts in high resolution, and Izuku agreed. I handed him his backpack as he stood up, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 encouraged us to do our best. I let out a soft purr as she affectionately rubbed my head. With a sense of determination, we announced our departure. In the locker room, the atmosphere was charged with excitement as the rest of the class donned matching uniforms, including me. I felt a twinge of disappointment since I couldn't wear the comfortable breathes 𝐒𝐮𝐬 had made for me. Izuku noticed my mood and tried to cheer me up, promising to get me some food after our training, which made my tail wag with happiness. He reminded me that this wasn't a real war and urged me not to harm anyone. Just then, Tenya burst into the room, rallying everyone for the upcoming challenge. Izuku took a deep breath to calm his nerves, and I gently rubbed his back for comfort. Shoto approached, and despite being our classmate, I felt uneasy around him. Shoto stated that he believed he was stronger than Izuku, which caught everyone's attention. I instinctively moved between them, hissing protectively. Shoto glanced at me before continuing, noting that All Might had his eye on Izuku and that he intended to defeat him. Izuku gasped, and in a protective instinct, I nudged him away from Shoto, causing the latter to stumble. The room fell silent, tension rising as I growled at him. Izuku tugged on my leash, urging me to sit, but I maintained my glare at Shoto, who returned my stare. Denki teased about a declaration of war, while Katsuki added that anyone wanting to challenge Izuku would have to get through me first. 𝐼𝐼𝐬 stepped in to defuse the situation, questioning why Shoto was provoking a fight just before we were set to begin. Shoto shrugged off 𝐼𝐼𝐬's hand and continued to stare at me, asserting that we weren't there to pretend to be friends. Izuku, trying to diffuse the tension, acknowledged Shoto's strength but emphasized that he wouldn't back down. I felt a surge of pride for Izuku, believing he would always be superior in my eyes. He smiled softly at me, patting my head as he continued discussing the competition. 𝐼𝐼𝐬 advised Izuku not to speak negatively, but Izuku insisted that the other students were all striving for the top, and he couldn't afford to fall behind. I understood his determination and felt a shift in my thoughts, but Izuku quickly reassured me that he would give it his all as well. As we exited with the others, I carried Izuku on my back to ease his nerves about the audience. Present Mike announced our class with enthusiasm, and Izuku expressed his anxiety about the crowd. I encouraged him to stay focused, reminding him that his happiness was my priority. As the introductions continued, I noticed a familiar blonde student who had previously insulted me and Uraraka. My instincts flared, and I hissed softly, but Izuku urged me to remain calm. I focused on the comforting sensation of his hand in my hair until we reached an adult female, Midnight, who introduced Katsuki as our representative. Izuku was surprised to see him step forward, and I sensed the tension in the air. Another student from a different class made a disparaging remark about me, prompting me to growl and spit acid at her feet, creating a hissing sound as it melted the ground beneath. I turned my attention back to Katsuki, who was receiving boos from the crowd, indicating he had said something controversial. Midnight then announced the start of the first game, calling it a qualifier, and the excitement in the room intensified. Every year, many shed tears here. The king might excel in this challenge if that's the case. Midnight announced the beginning of the first game, and a screen appeared above her, displaying an object spinning rapidly. When it stopped, she revealed the game, an obstacle course race. Izuku recognized it as an obstacle course race. Midnight explained that all 11 classes would participate, and the course would span the outer circumference of the stadium, about 4 kilometers. She confidently stated that she could run around the entire track 5 times before anyone reached the finish line. Midnight emphasized the school's selling point, freedom. As long as participants stayed on course, they could do anything they wanted. Izuku's thoughts raced with possibilities, but he kept them to himself. Midnight instructed everyone to take their places. They lined up in front of a gateway marked by 3 green lights. Izuku removed the collar and leash, concerned that they might get caught or grabbed. His determination inspired eagerness in his companion. The lights began to turn off one by one, and the narrow entrance loomed ahead, crowded with competitors eager to be first. It was clear that someone might get trampled when the race began. With a loud command, Midnight shouted for them to start. In a flash, the companion grabbed Izuku and leaped ahead of the crowd. As predicted, the competitors began to jostle each other, trying to push through. Within moments, they reached the other side, just in time to witness an explosion of ice engulfing the entrance. Izuku expressed his gratitude, but before the companion could respond, ice trapped their feet, causing a stumble. A candy cane-themed competitor sped past them, and the companion refused to let Izuku finish last. They placed him on their back and dropped to all fours, dashing across the ice with agility. Their claws dug into the ground, propelling them forward with each powerful stride. A voice called out, determined not to let them escape. The explosion-themed competitor was closing in, but the companions swiftly passed the candy cane competitor, regaining their lead. They focused intently, knowing that losing concentration could jeopardize Izuku's chances. Suddenly, they skidded to a halt upon seeing several massive robots ahead, one of which had just knocked Mineta aside. A robot declared that it had found its target. The companion turned to Izuku, asking for orders. Izuku, recalling their previous practice, suggested that now was the time to fully transform. The companion affirmed that it would be done at his command. With a nod, Izuku instructed them to start hunting. As Izuku backed away from the robots, the other competitors watched in awe as the companion transformed into their formidable Ravager form. The difference now was that the crest on 𝐒/𝐻𝐬's head was H/C, while the spikes on their back displayed a vibrant array of colors, ranging from fiery red to golden yellow. However, the majority remained their original black. 𝐒/𝐻 let out a powerful roar that sent shivers of fear through the hearts of every human present, except for Izuku, who gazed at 𝐒/𝐻 in awe. Towering over 6 meters tall, 𝐒/𝐻 had transformed their hands back into large F/C blades, and their tails stretched far behind them. It felt exhilarating to return to their Ravager form. All the robots turned their attention to 𝐒/𝐻 as they raised their blade-like hands and tail, ready for their first battle back as a Ravager. It was time to see if their skills were still sharp. In a different time, 𝐒/𝐻 sat on their king's bed, watching as Izuku dashed around his room, changing clothes with an unusual burst of energy. Izuku exclaimed with excitement that today was a special day. He tossed his shirt into the air, which landed on 𝐒/𝐻, completely covering them. 𝐒/𝐻 struggled to free themselves, hissing in frustration, which only made Izuku giggle before helping them out of the shirt's grasp. He then picked 𝐒/𝐻 up and jumped up and down, a huge smile lighting up his face. Izuku declared that it was Christmas, but 𝐒/𝐻 tilted their head in confusion, not understanding the significance of the word. Noticing 𝐒/𝐻's bewilderment, Izuku paused to explain that he would teach them all about this wonderful holiday. He held 𝐒/𝐻 close and ran out of the room, leaving them to dangle in his arms. As they entered the living room, 𝐒/𝐻 noticed a tree adorned with boxes beneath it. They wondered how a tree had grown inside and if the boxes were offerings. Before 𝐒/𝐻 could ponder further, they arrived in the kitchen, where 𝐒𝐮𝐬 greeted them with a warm, Merry Christmas. Izuku returned the greeting enthusiastically, while 𝐒/𝐻 hissed in acknowledgement. Izuku placed 𝐒/𝐻 on the table before rushing out of the kitchen, instructing them to stay put. 𝐒/𝐻 sat on the table, anxiously awaiting his return. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 placed a plate of cookies and a bowl of milk in front of 𝐒/𝐻, her gentle smile reminiscent of their own mother. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 encouraged 𝐒/𝐻 to enjoy the cookies but reminded them to save some for Izuku. 𝐒/𝐻 nibbled on a warm cookie, savoring its delicious flavor, and drank some milk, enjoying the moment of quiet reflection. Thoughts of loss filled 𝐒/𝐻's mind. They were determined to protect 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and Izuku, the last remnants of their family. Memories of their siblings and the uncertainty of their mother's fate weighed heavily on 𝐒/𝐻. Suddenly, Izuku returned, interrupting 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷's thoughts, carrying a box in his arms. He placed it on the table and climbed onto the seat next to 𝐒/N. With excitement, he explained that on Christmas, a man named Santa delivers presents to every child in the world in one night. If children behaved well, they would receive gifts. If not, they would get coal instead. The idea of a human delivering gifts to every child seemed extraordinary to 𝐒/N, who decided to remain vigilant. Izuku continued, explaining that people could also give gifts to others and that they decorated a tree with various ornaments. He rummaged through the box and pulled out a small green glass ball, explaining that it was an ornament meant for the tree in the living room. 𝐒/N inspected the glass ball, rolling it with their bladed hands, eager for the next lesson. Izuku then revealed a star, explaining that it was placed on the very top of the tree. 𝐒/N marveled at the star, recalling their attempts to reach one back home. Next, Izuku produced a small plant with red objects attached, calling it mistletoe. He mentioned that when two people stood under it, they had to kiss. 𝐒/N held the mistletoe above their head, searching for any magical influence, but felt nothing unusual. Curious, 𝐒/N placed the mistletoe back on the table and leaned into the box for more treasures, only to tumble inside and become covered in ornaments. Izuku, noticing the commotion, reached into the box and pulled 𝐒/N out, revealing them adorned with colorful ornaments. Izuku let out a small giggle before removing the various decorations that covered his body. He suggested they go decorate the tree instead. With a nod, he smiled and placed me down, just as 𝐒𝐮𝐬 returned with a box of ornaments she had been searching for. She approached them, patting Izuku's head and then picking me up, asking if they wanted to help decorate the tree. Izuku eagerly agreed, and I made a small sound of excitement. We made our way to the living room, with 𝐒𝐮𝐬 carrying me and Izuku holding the box of ornaments. I sat on the floor next to the box, watching 𝐒𝐮𝐬 and Izuku decorate the tree. Although I couldn't help much without hands, I used my tail to hand them ornaments. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 mentioned they were almost done and that she would need a chair to place the star on top. Izuku explained that the star belonged at the very top of the tree, and given the tree's height, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 would need assistance. I decided to help by grabbing the star with my tail and climbing up the wall to reach the top of the tree. My blades and feet aided me in scaling the wall and clinging to the ceiling. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noticed my absence and asked where I was, while Izuku thought I was next to the box. At that moment, I was above the tree, carefully trying to place the star on top. They both looked up, startled by the rustling, and saw me attempting to complete the task. Izuku called out for me, expressing concern for my safety. I sensed their worry but continued my efforts. Despite the height, I felt confident in my abilities. After a few moments, I successfully placed the star on top of the tree, filling me with pride. In my excitement, I did a little dance, forgetting I was still on the ceiling. Izuku rushed forward and caught me just in time, cradling me in his arms with a look of relief. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 joined him, her expression filled with concern as she asked if I was okay and if I needed to go to the hospital. I shook my head, reassuring them I was fine. Izuku held me tightly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, expressing his gratitude that I was safe and his longing to never see me hurt. I wrapped my tail around his hand and returned the embrace, careful not to harm him with my blades. To lighten the mood, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 suggested that Izuku and I go play outside in the snow, promising some treats when we returned. His spirits lifted, and he thanked his mother before grabbing my coat and rushing back to his room, with me once again in his arms. The snow was not too deep, reaching Izuku's ankles while covering the lower half of my body. I nestled in the hood of his coat, a green scarf wrapped around my collar. We would have left sooner, but Izuku had tried to put a dog coat on me, which I had vehemently resisted. In a flashback, I recalled being cornered by Izuku as he approached with the coat. I dodged him and ran to the other side of the room, only to be caught when I tried to hide under his bed. In a moment of desperation, I shredded the coat with my claws, leaving Izuku staring at the remnants in disbelief. He sighed and offered me his green scarf instead. Back in the present, Izuku suggested we visit Katsuki, but I felt annoyed at the thought. I couldn't understand why Izuku still considered him a friend after everything. Izuku tried to cheer me up by offering me a cookie his mother had made. I reluctantly accepted it, allowing it to lift my spirits as we continued our search for the explosive blonde. After a few minutes, we arrived at the park, which was blanketed in snow, making it look like a winter wonderland. While Izuku admired the scenery, I noticed something small and white speeding toward him. Reacting quickly, I spat acid at the projectile, melting it before it could reach him. Izuku turned to see where it had come from, spotting a group of kids behind a snow wall, all wearing matching coats. They were surprised and began to focus their efforts on Izuku, launching a barrage of snowballs at him. I shot more acid at the incoming projectiles, but they kept coming, forcing Izuku to look for cover. Just then, Katsuki's voice called out to him, urging him to come over and be useful, just as he ducked to avoid more snowballs. Their change of targets bought enough time for them to run toward Katsuki. As they approached, it became clear that he had created a foxhole spacious enough for multiple people, but he was the only one inside. Once they were in the foxhole, he glared at them before crouching down. Katsuki explained that the opponents were from a private school nearby and had decided to retaliate after he had challenged one of them to a snowball fight. He hadn't expected the coward to bring friends along. They were pinned down, and Katsuki urged them to throw some snowballs back. He launched a few snowballs before ducking behind cover as enemy projectiles flew past. Izuku attempted to return fire, but a snowball would have hit him if it hadn't been melted in time. This plan wasn't working, and as Katsuki's protector, it was their duty to devise a strategy. Normally, rushing the enemy would be the plan, but given their small size and the depth of the snow, that was not an option. For once, they had to rely on their brains. Izuku tried to fire back occasionally, but the projectiles kept coming, forcing him to take cover quickly. After a few moments, a plan formed in their mind, one that seemed so ridiculous it just might work. To communicate this strategy to Izuku and Katsuki, they began drawing pictures in the snow with their tail. Katsuki questioned what they were drawing, while Izuku observed with curiosity. By the time they noticed, the plan was complete. It depicted two stick figures, one with spiky hair. Carrying them, while the other, wearing a crown, placed snowballs on their tail. The images were crude, but Katsuki seemed to understand it, albeit with some skepticism. Izuku confirmed the plan, and they nodded enthusiastically, eager to unleash a flurry of snowballs on their enemies. A snowball landed behind them, startling Izuku. Katsuki expressed disbelief that they could gather so much from simple drawings, but Izuku insisted they needed his help to win. Despite the initial reluctance, Katsuki agreed, advising them to pack rocks in the snowballs for added impact. Thus began their counterattack. As Izuku crafted snowballs, they climbed onto Katsuki's back, trying to find a stable position. Katsuki warned them to be careful with their claws, threatening consequences if they damaged his coat. Once settled, they secured themselves in place, resembling a backpack ready to launch projectiles. Izuku finished making a good number of snowballs and approached with a handful. Katsuki urged him to load the snowballs quickly. With a signal from Izuku, they launched the first snowball high into the air, while Izuku peeked out to see where it would land. They soon learned it had hit a squirrel in a nearby tree. Izuku directed Katsuki to adjust their position, and they prepared for another launch. After a few more attempts, they successfully bombarded the enemy, causing some of them to retreat, injured from the onslaught. Katsuki celebrated their victory, albeit with a hint of sarcasm, acknowledging their usefulness. Izuku smiled and placed them in his hood, inviting them to hang out at his house. Katsuki appeared ready to refuse but reconsidered when he noticed them brandishing their blades playfully. Izuku mentioned that his mom was making snacks, which convinced Katsuki to join, albeit begrudgingly. They finally arrived home, with Izuku announcing their safe return along with Katsuki. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 welcomed them in the kitchen, where she had prepared hot chocolate. As they enjoyed the warm drink, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 pointed out the mistletoe hanging above them, prompting a flurry of protests from Katsuki and a confused hiss from them. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 playfully encouraged Katsuki to participate, promising more hot chocolate if he did. He paused, weighing the pros and cons of the situation. In the end, he decided he was willing to give up some of his pride for more of 𝐒𝐮𝐬's delicious hot chocolate. Katsuki charged forward, determined to get more of that hot chocolate no matter what. While drinking from his bowl, he was taken by surprise when he picked 𝐼/N up and affectionately kissed their head. A few clicking sounds followed by 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐽's giggles made him drop 𝐼/N. He then began to furiously wipe his mouth while 𝐼/N wiped their head. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 poured more hot chocolate into Katsuki's cup while 𝐼/N continued to wipe their head. A few moments later, Izuku picked 𝐼/N up, causing confusion before he gave them a gentle kiss on the forehead. Unlike with Katsuki, 𝐼/N returned the gesture by rubbing their head against his. He smiled cheerfully while hugging them. Izuku wished 𝐼/N a Merry Christmas, and they cuddled deeper into his arms, burying their head in his neck as 𝐒𝐮𝐬 took a picture of them. She mentioned needing to send the photos to Mitsuki. Later, 𝐼/N watched over Izuku as he slept when an unfamiliar scent made them rise on full alert. With both Izuku and 𝐒𝐮𝐬 asleep, 𝐼/N felt the need to protect them. They quietly exited Izuku's room, heading toward the living room where the noise originated. Upon entering, 𝐼/N spotted a human with a giant bag eating their cookies. An intruder was there, and he was eating 𝐼/N's cookies. Without hesitation, 𝐼/N charged at the mysterious figure, ready to confront him. The man turned around at the sound of rapid footsteps, only to be met with 𝐼/N's sharp blades. Meanwhile, Izuku remained asleep, unaware of the commotion. Present Mike announced that 𝐼/N of Class 1A had grown to enormous proportions. Although not as large as the opponents before them, 𝐼/N looked extremely cool and was ready to face the first barrier, Robo Inferno. The robots were much larger, but this only fueled 𝐼/N's excitement for the upcoming fight. As one robot extended its hand to grab 𝐼/N, Izuku called out to them, and 𝐼/N acknowledged him with a slight turn of their head. Izuku gave a determined smile and pointed to the robot reaching out. With a single command, 𝐼/N swung their blade arm up, successfully severing the robot's hand. The robot paused, allowing 𝐼/N to spit a large amount of acid at its head, which quickly melted through the machine, causing it to fall back limp. Present Mike declared that 𝐼/N had defeated the first opponent in mere seconds, kicking off the battle with a bang. 𝐼/N immediately went on the offensive, using their powerful legs to jump toward another robot's head with blades extended. Upon impact, the machine stumbled back but quickly regained its balance. 𝐼/N began to stab into its head, cutting through the armor with ease. While engaged with the machine, two more robots approached and launched punches toward 𝐼/N. Despite their size, 𝐼/N managed to jump down, avoiding the punches and causing them to collide with their ally's head instead. The combined force sent the struck robot flying into another, destroying both. Izuku praised 𝐼/N, which made them happy and caused their tail to wag, inadvertently destroying a group of small robots approaching from behind. Present Mike commented on 𝐼/N's agility, noting that for a big guy, they moved like a cat. Aizawa observed that although 𝐼/N was outnumbered, they seemed to know what they were doing, using their body as a weapon and making the robots destroy each other. 𝐼/N raised their head and shot another stream of acid at one of the machines, coating it entirely and reducing it to nothing. The remaining robot attempted to crush 𝐼/N, but they dodged, causing it to bury its foot in the ground. Activating their fire quirk, 𝐼/N's blades and tail glowed bright red, but they realized that the glowing spikes indicated which quirk they were using, which could be a problem. Regardless, 𝐼/N wrapped their tail around the robot's leg, quickly melting through and separating its foot from its leg. The robot would have fallen if ice hadn't suddenly enveloped the area. A candy cane-clad figure ran past, glaring at 𝐼/N. Present Mike announced that the ice had stopped 𝐼/N's momentum, and the first one through the barrier was Shoto Todoroki from Class 1A. As the students began to run forward, the robot started to tip over. Shoto warned them not to approach, explaining that he had frozen the robot while it was unbalanced, making it angry. The robot fell to the side, causing everyone to scatter as 𝐼/N spun around, using their tail to melt the ice surrounding them. Letting out another loud roar, they prepared for more robots to appear. Fighting them all would be a waste of time. 𝐼/N needed to ensure that Izuku got first place. They sniffed the air once before locating Izuku in the crowd, covering his face to protect himself from the dirt cloud created by the fallen robot. Deactivating their quirk, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 blades and tail returned to normal as they ran toward the crowd, causing panic and chaos as they approached. All except Izuku, who smiled as I stopped in front of him. I sat down and lowered my head while he reached up with both hands and gently petted my face. This action shocked the other humans, as they thought I was going to attack him, but my reaction surprised them. Izuku expressed his pride in me, and those words filled me with joy and happiness, causing my tail to thump against the ground repeatedly, making everyone jump, even the giant machine bouncing slightly. My king is proud of me. This is the greatest day of my life, even better than when I had to defend myself against Danny's challenge. Present Mike reminded everyone that the race was still ongoing, prompting a flurry of movement as my king began to panic. Izuku urged me to hurry and transform back. I obeyed, quickly shifting back into my human form. Soon, my blades became hands and my body shrank. Once I was back in my human form, I wrapped my tail around Izuku's waist and pulled him close for a hug. He returned the embrace before letting go with a smile. He expressed his affection for me, but we needed to hurry, as everyone else was already ahead. I nodded and turned around, getting down on all fours. Izuku held onto my shoulders, resting his head on my back to shield himself from the wind. I thought about how I could easily outrun the others if he ordered me to. With that, I charged forward, my human form granting me speed. A few small robots appeared in our path, but I dodged, melted, sliced, or charged through them, ensuring Izuku was protected by my body. I wondered if 𝐒𝐮𝐬 was watching us. Back at the Midoriya residence, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 sat on the couch in front of the TV, waving two small flags, one green with Izuku's face and the other black with a Xenomorph head and my face. She cheered for us. Present Mike announced that Izuku and I had just caught up to the rest of the competition in mere seconds, but now we had to pass the second barrier. I skidded to a stop behind Mina, Tsu, and 𝐒𝐻𝐿, startling them into slipping off the ledge and into the abyss below. Izuku called for me to grab them. I quickly released him to catch 𝐒𝐻𝐿 with my tail while I wrapped my arms around Mina's and Tsu's waists, pulling them back to safety. Present Mike warned that if anyone fell, they were out, and that it was time to crawl. It was a close call. They would have perished if I hadn't caught them. All three were pressed against me as I moved us away from the ledge. My king rushed up, apologizing for scaring them and asking if they were all right. Mina confirmed they were okay, while 𝐒𝐻𝐿 expressed her fear of falling. Tsu thanked me for saving them. I pulled all three into a hug, making their cheeks turn red. 𝐒𝐻𝐿 reached up and scratched under my chin, causing me to purr, which vibrated through all of them before I eventually released them. Tsu gave me a small wave, still a bit flushed, wishing me good luck as she jumped onto a rope, beginning her journey to the other side. Mina remarked on her speed, and soon many others began to cross in their own ways. The most unique was a girl with pink hair and a strange machine attached to her feet. As I assessed the distance to the other side, an idea formed in my mind. I could clear this in a few jumps. I wrapped my tail around Izuku's waist again, surprising him as he held onto my shoulders. He asked what my plan was, and Mina and 𝐒𝐻𝐿 looked on with curiosity as I began to walk backward. I announced my intention to jump. Izuku questioned if I could cover the distance, and I reassured him that I would never attempt something I wasn't confident in, especially if it involved his safety. With that, I stopped walking and got down on all fours, preparing to jump as far as I could. My king tightened his hold on me, and I secured him with my tail to ensure he wouldn't fall off. Present Mike announced that I was attempting to jump the entire course while carrying another student on my back. I ran forward, and at the edge I launched myself into a powerful jump. I put so much strength into it that the ground beneath me cracked. We soared through the air for a few seconds before gravity began to pull us down. Normally, I would land on my feet, but we passed by an explosive human who seemed displeased to see us. He shouted in frustration and created a large explosion, knocking me off course. As we rapidly approached the ground, I quickly moved Izuku to my front, hugging him close while turning my back to the ground, ready to take the impact for him. I warned him to brace for impact, and he curled deeper into my chest just as my back hit the ground. The impact created a sizable hole as we skidded to a stop. Present Mike announced that I had not only made it to the other side but had also taken the full force of the crash landing for my friend. I felt unworthy of such a title. I was merely a soldier following orders. Izuku checked on me, rapidly examining my body for any damage while I did the same for him. After a quick scan, I found no harm on him or his clothes, confirming that I had done my job well. Some humans began to make their way across, prompting the need for us to start running if we wanted to pass the candy cane and the explosive human. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 reassured Izuku that they were fine, but emphasized the importance of moving quickly since they were still in a competition. Izuku, realizing the urgency, quickly agreed and got off of 𝐒𝐮 as they pulled themselves out of the hole they had created. They started running side by side, and soon they spotted two giant signs with a skull in the center, warning of danger mines. Upon closer inspection, they noticed what appeared to be a heart in the mouths of the skulls. Present Mike announced that they had quickly arrived at the final barrier, explaining that it was a minefield. 𝐒𝐮 suddenly stopped and grabbed a random human nearby, tossing them into the middle of the field, which triggered a burst of pink explosions. Izuku questioned 𝐒𝐮's actions, to which 𝐒𝐮 explained they were testing the safety of the path ahead. Izuku sighed as Present Mike continued to elaborate on the final obstacle, noting that the mines were designed for games and, while not overly powerful, were loud and flashy enough to startle anyone. Aizawa remarked that the reaction would depend on the individual. As the humans began to navigate the minefield, a few triggered the explosives. 𝐒𝐮 asked Izuku how he wanted to approach the challenge, whether to carry him across, clear a path, jump over it, or something else. Izuku, however, expressed his longing to tackle the obstacle on his own, explaining that he wanted to test his abilities without relying on 𝐒𝐮 all the time. He acknowledged that there would be times when 𝐒𝐮 wouldn't be there to assist him, and he needed to learn to handle those situations independently. 𝐒𝐮 felt a pang of uncertainty but ultimately agreed to support Izuku in whatever way he needed. Izuku smiled and began to share his plan. Meanwhile, an unseen being observed the students from above, intrigued by a select few, particularly the human Xenomorph. This creature was unlike anything the being had encountered before, possessing both transformation abilities and powers. The being found the prospect of hunting such a powerful entity thrilling and left to prepare for the challenge. 𝐒𝐮 questioned Izuku's confidence in their plan after they had gathered a significant amount of explosives into one pile, which promised a large and colorful explosion. Izuku admitted he wasn't entirely sure but felt more confident with 𝐒𝐮 by his side. This reassurance made 𝐒𝐮 happy, and they affirmed their readiness for their part in the plan. As the countdown began, 𝐒𝐮 positioned themselves in front of the mines, holding Izuku against their chest. With a nod of confirmation, 𝐒𝐮 fell back onto the mines, launching them high into the air. Present Mike excitedly announced the explosion that had propelled 𝐒𝐮 and Izuku forward, praising their stylish execution. However, they began to descend too early due to their combined weight, and 𝐒𝐮 realized they wouldn't make it to the other side. Above the candy cane and explosive human, 𝐒𝐮 instructed Izuku to keep running upon landing. Without allowing Izuku to question the plan, 𝐒𝐮 tossed him toward the finish while tackling both the explosive and candy cane human to the ground. Present Mike noted the unexpected turn of events as 𝐒𝐮 took down the leading contenders. Katsuki shouted in frustration, demanding to be released. 𝐒𝐮 kept both opponents pinned down effortlessly, watching as Izuku sprinted ahead. The crowd erupted in cheers as Izuku crossed the finish line, and 𝐒𝐮 let out a triumphant roar in celebration of his victory. Amidst the noise, Izuku called out to 𝐒𝐮, promising a treat. 𝐒𝐮 broke free from the ice that had nearly encased them and sped past the other competitors to reach Izuku, who held a snack in his hand, tears of joy in his eyes. 𝐒𝐮 gently took the snack, breaking it in half and giving the larger piece to Izuku, feeling proud to be in second place while Izuku claimed first. Present Mike announced the impressive finish of the duo, commending their performance. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚 congratulated Izuku, encouraging him that he was on track to surpass All Might. Tears welled up in Izuku's eyes again, but 𝐒𝐮 brushed them away, placing a piece of the snack in his mouth, knowing that food could always lift spirits. 𝐼𝐚𝐬 approached, excitedly praising their achievements. Izuku, flustered by the attention, attempted to downplay their success, lost in thought about the events that had just unfolded. As they waited, the second-in-command of the class arrived with the grape human secured on her back. Minoru declared himself a genius for having accomplished 2 tasks at once, while Momo expressed her disapproval, reminding him that she had allied with some of those he had harmed. An attack on them was an attack on her and her soldiers. In a moment of frustration, a half-eaten treat was thrown at the grape human, hitting him squarely in the head and sending him crashing into the wall. The second-in-command turned and offered a grateful smile before moving on. Yet, a strange sensation lingered, as if they were being watched by something familiar throughout the event. Midnight announced that the first game of the first-year stage had concluded and encouraged everyone to look at the results. As expected, the king was in first place, with the narrator following closely behind in second. Midnight continued, stating that the top 42 would advance to the next round, assuring those who didn't make it that other opportunities awaited them. The real competition was about to begin, and the press would be eagerly watching. Scanning the crowd, the narrator noticed the explosive human glaring intensely, seemingly furious. Confused about what had gone wrong, they recalled only having pinned him down and pressed his face into the ground. Midnight then revealed that the next game would be a cavalry battle. Excitement surged through the narrator, recalling their previous experiences in battle, confident they could handle the competition. Midnight explained that participants could form teams of 2 to 4, but each person had been assigned a point value based on their previous performance. Suddenly, a realization struck. Their king's first-place finish had effectively placed a target on his head. As students gathered around him with predatory gazes, the narrator let out a loud roar, causing them to retreat in fear. They would have to get through the king's protector to claim the bounty, and the narrator was determined to keep him safe. All the students looked at 𝐒𝐮 and Izuku, torn between pursuing the bounty and facing the wrath of 𝐒𝐮. For a sane person, the choice was clear, but desperation could lead to foolish decisions. Izuku felt 𝐒𝐮 holding him close, growling at anyone who dared to glance in his direction. He attempted to calm him down with treats, but the crowd only seemed to heighten 𝐒𝐮's agitation, prompting everyone to back away, frightened by his protective demeanor. Midnight began explaining the rules of the cavalry battle, detailing the time limit and point system. Teams would try to grab each other's headbands while keeping their own points safe. Even if a headband was stolen or a team fell, they would not be out of the game. As the students began discussing the rules, Izuku looked up at 𝐒𝐮, who smiled down at him. He felt reassured by 𝐒𝐮's confidence in his abilities. Midnight continued, emphasizing that quirks could be used during the game, but any attempts to deliberately knock others down would result in immediate disqualification. 𝐒𝐮 groaned, clearly disappointed that he wouldn't be able to take down other students. Izuku reached up to rub his head, eliciting a contented purr and a wagging tail. With the signal to build teams given, 𝐒𝐮 pondered whether anyone would want to ally with them, given the target on Izuku's back and their own intimidating presence. Izuku seemed deep in thought, likely strategizing, while 𝐒𝐮 observed their classmates. Some were trying to recruit the explosive human, while a few approached 𝐒𝐮 only to flee in fear after receiving a low growl. Izuku tapped 𝐒𝐮 to get his attention, signaling it was time to find teammates before the time ran out. As they moved, Izuku approached a classmate with a tail, but the student turned away, using his tail to hide his face. This action ignited 𝐒𝐮's fury, and he growled, ready to defend his king. However, Izuku quickly restrained him, urging calmness and suggesting they find someone else. Just then, 𝐼𝐚𝐬 called out to them, running up with a bright smile. 𝐒𝐮 settled beside Izuku as she proposed they form a team. This declaration brought tears to Izuku's eyes, soaking both 𝐒𝐮 and 𝐼𝐚𝐬 in emotion. Izuku questioned if it was truly okay, knowing that many would likely target him due to his high point value. Tears streamed down my face, soaking my hair and obscuring my vision. Izuku remarked that if we kept running away, then our opponent would win. As the tears subsided, I shook my head to clear the water from my hair. Izuku, looking a bit uncertain, responded that he thought she was overestimating him. Izuku insisted that with Y/N on our side, we couldn't lose. They both turned to me, and I shook off the water like a dog. As they approached, Izuku brushed my hair away from my eyes, revealing their cheerful expressions. I smiled back at them and stood up, shaking my head again to rid my hair of the moisture. Izuku declared that it was better to team up with those you got along with. Izuku's cheeks flushed a light red as he made a peculiar face. Izuku teased him about looking unattractive, prompting me to pull Izuku into a protective hug while glaring at her. I was not pleased with her comment about my king. He was the most adorable person on the planet, without a doubt. She flinched slightly at my reaction but quickly produced a chocolate chip cookie. My tail began to wag uncontrollably at the sight of it. I released Izuku and crouched down, my eyes locked on the cookie. Izuku tossed it to me, and I leaped forward, catching it in midair and devouring it in one bite. Content with my snack, I returned to Izuku's side. I decided to let her insult slide this time, but next time, it would take more than a cookie to earn my forgiveness. Izuku dried his eyes and turned back to Izuku, expressing his longing to team up with her as well. He noted that, for teams, it was best to work with those who communicated well. Izuku enthusiastically agreed, and Izuku shared his plan, which involved using her quirk to make him and Ida lighter for better maneuverability. As he explained, I lay on the ground beside him, with Izuku affectionately rubbing my head. Izuku suggested that Ida should lead the charge, but Ida hesitated, stating that he needed to grow stronger and could not simply follow us. He declared his intention to challenge us, which I took as a sign that he would soon fall like the others who had tried to best my king. Izuku looked concerned, and the attention of everyone shifted to Izuku. I placed my hands on his shoulders, growling softly to assert that anyone who wanted to challenge him would have to deal with me first. My display of protectiveness deterred most, except for two individuals who glared back at me. Suddenly, a pink-haired girl approached, hovering on strange shoes. She introduced herself as 𝐒𝐻𝐬 from the support course and expressed her longing to team up with Izuku. I growled at her as she got too close for comfort. Izuku, surprised, asked who she was, and she explained her intentions of using our team's visibility to promote her inventions. Izuku, confused, tried to interject, but Mei continued to speak over her, excitedly discussing her creations. I sat down, realizing she posed no real threat, just an annoyance. Mei held up a peculiar metal backpack, claiming it was inspired by a well-known hero's gear. Izuku recognized the reference and began to enthusiastically discuss it with her. While they chatted, I noticed Izuku looking a bit lonely, so I made my way to her. Her smile returned as I approached, and I greeted her warmly. Sitting at her feet, we both watched Izuku and Mei continue their lively conversation. It seemed he didn't even notice the departure. Izuku observed that they appeared to be getting along well. The response was a simple acknowledgement of Izuku's potential new friendship. A brief silence lingered before Uraraka posed a question about the ability to speak. The answer revealed that attempts to communicate had resulted in discomfort, suggesting that perhaps more practice might help. As Uraraka affectionately petted the head, a contented purr escaped, and the tail began to wag. She quietly remarked to herself, noting the playful nature, which was a slight blow to pride as a warrior, but the affection was too pleasant to resist. Sensing someone watching, attention shifted to a blonde individual from the cafeteria. He caught the gaze and responded with a smirk before walking away, prompting thoughts of vigilance. Izuku called out, prompting an eager response. He crouched slightly, signaling to approach. With a swift dash on all fours, the arrival was marked by a careful stop at his feet, ensuring no dirt was kicked up. Izuku smiled and began to outline the plan, which was met with a nod of determination. As the countdown reached 0, alarm sounded, signaling the start of the event. Midnight announced the beginning, and Present Mike detailed the formation of teams on the field. Izuku was mounted on the back, flanked by Mei and Izuku. The atmosphere was charged with excitement as battle cries echoed. Before the chaos erupted, Izuku leaned in, whispering a reminder to avoid excessive aggression. A sigh of resignation followed, acknowledging the need for restraint. Present Mic called for the signal fire, and the anticipation grew. The crowd cheered as the teams prepared for the clash. Scanning the audience, a fiery glare caught attention, reminiscent of a previous encounter. Shaking off the distraction, focus returned to the task at hand. Present Mic's countdown intensified the urgency, and the resolve to protect Izuku solidified. As the signal to start rang out, teams surged forward. A tactical retreat was proposed, showcasing strategic thinking. However, the ground beneath them softened, creating a precarious situation. With the other teams closing in, a defensive measure was prepared to delay their advance. Uraraka struggled to escape the binding force of a purple ball, prompting concern. Izuku's command to flee was met with determination, but the situation grew dire as the enemy closed in. The scent of multiple opponents filled the air, heightening the sense of urgency. With a quick assessment, the need for action was clear. The order to run was given, but the hindrance of Uraraka's foot created a moment of panic. The realization of being surrounded by adversaries loomed, but the resolve to protect Izuku remained steadfast. The situation was critical, and the focus shifted to finding a way out. Midnight confirmed that it was allowed. The small human retreated as a long tongue shot toward Izuku. To protect him, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 quickly used their tail to lower Izuku's head, causing Tsuyu to miss. As her tongue retracted, 𝐒𝐮 prepared to defend their team. Tsuyu acknowledged their efforts, impressed by the duo's performance. Izuku marveled at Tsuyu's skills, while she insisted on being called Tsu. A barrage of purple projectiles accompanied Tsuyu's tongue, but 𝐒𝐮 used their tail to block the incoming attacks and swatted Tsuyu's tongue away. Present Mic announced that Team Mineta was utilizing their size advantage effectively, comparing them to a tank. Meanwhile, Team Midoriya's defense was holding strong, but the pressure was mounting. 𝐒𝐮 urged Izuku to leave quickly. Izuku activated his jetpack, but Uraraka's foot was still stuck, resulting in her shoe being destroyed. Mei lamented the loss of her gadget, while Izuku apologized but noted they had successfully escaped. As they soared through the air, the explosive human propelled himself upward, aiming to catch up. Izuku called out to Katsuki, who warned him not to get carried away. Katsuki attempted to shoot an explosion at Izuku, but 𝐒𝐮 swiftly maneuvered to take the brunt of the blast instead. As the smoke cleared, 𝐒𝐮 glared at Katsuki, unable to retaliate fully since their hands were occupied with Izuku. They managed to swat Katsuki away with their tail. Izuku checked on 𝐒𝐮, who reassured him that they had endured worse injuries. Their landing was a bit rough due to Uraraka's broken shoe, prompting Izuku to thank her, to which she replied that it was challenging to control with just one foot. Present Mic noted that everyone was targeting the first-place team, with Class A in hot pursuit. He announced the current rankings, revealing that their team was the only one from Class A with points. This revelation surprised 𝐒𝐮, especially when they noticed that even the explosive human had lost his headband. Nito commented on Class A's lack of strategy, and 𝐒𝐮 observed the blonde human taking Bakugo's headband, realizing his plan to seize headbands while others were distracted. Katsuki, furious, demanded the headband back, while Nito explained that it was a good idea to focus on headbands rather than chasing temporary leads. Katsuki's aggression intensified as Nito taunted him about his past encounters with villains. 𝐒𝐮 considered shifting their focus to Nito for a moment. Katsuki, filled with rage, instructed his team to change their plan to eliminate their opponents before going after Izuku. Izuku attempted to warn everyone, but 𝐒𝐮 halted abruptly, causing their teammates to stumble. They growled at the enemy team, regaining their balance. Izuku noticed the candy cane human glaring at 𝐒𝐮, which heightened their agitation. Present Mic announced that less than half the time remained in the battle. Izuku realized that the situation would not be easy. As the second half of the battle commenced, the candy cane human's glare shifted from 𝐒𝐮 to Izuku, further escalating tensions. Shoto declared his intention to take something from them, prompting 𝐒/N to prepare for a confrontation. They gently wrapped their tail around their teammates and began to lift them, with 𝐼𝐼𝐷 and 𝐼𝐻𝐸 stabilizing themselves while Izuku held on. 𝐒/N requested Izuku to remove their collar, expressing concern about accidentally damaging something precious. Izuku smiled and complied, holding onto the collar as 𝐒/N transformed into their more powerful form. The sight caused the Candy Cane's team to back away in fear. Present Mike announced 𝐒/N's transformation, noting their determination to lead the team to victory. 𝐒/N rose and let out a powerful roar, prompting many teams to pause and watch, while some resumed battling. The Candy Cane's fearful expression shifted to determination as he glared up at them, realizing the challenge ahead. I stood tall, gazing down at the small Candy Cane figure. Even in this form, he maintained a defiant expression, refusing to show any fear. I let out a monstrous roar, undoubtedly instilling fear in the hearts of those around us. Izuku urged me to keep moving, reminding me that time was running out. I acknowledged his command, ready to act. Just as I prepared to run, a bright light flashed from one of the humans. Sensing danger, I lifted my head, launching Izuku, 𝐒𝐻𝐸, and 𝐚𝐫𝐲 high into the air, narrowly avoiding the incoming attack. The electric strike staggered me, causing some discomfort, but it would have been far worse for Izuku and his friends had they remained on me. The other humans were not as fortunate, suffering the full brunt of the attack. I redirected my attention to the sky, hearing Izuku call out to me. I quickly used my tail to catch them, placing them safely on my shoulders. They were breathing, gripping tightly as they regained their composure. Izuku expressed his concern, asking me to warn them next time I made such a move. I promised it wouldn't happen again. With my team back in place, I dashed away from the humans, who were now being pursued by the Candy Cane and his team. Large walls of ice began to form around us, trapping us in a confined space. Izuku shouted for me to stop, and I planted my feet firmly into the ground, halting our advance just in time. The commentator announced that Team Midoriya had nowhere left to go. I turned to face the humans, causing them to hesitate momentarily before the Candy Cane ordered them to hold their ground. He attempted to freeze my legs, but I used my tail to break the ice and retaliated by swinging it toward them. Every time they tried to close the gap, I slammed my tail near them, successfully deterring their advances. I had to keep moving to avoid their electric attacks, knowing that a direct hit would also hurt Izuku. It was a tedious battle, but the ice walls allowed us to focus on just one team. The commentator noted that time was running out, and I could sense victory drawing near. I noticed the Candy Cane's frustration growing, and Izuku affectionately rubbed my head, causing me to purr in response. Suddenly, a loud blast redirected my focus back to the battle. The Candy Cane's team had moved behind me, but the Candy Cane himself was nowhere to be seen. I felt a sharp chill as my right leg began to freeze, my armor cracking under the strain. The Candy Cane was scaling my legs, freezing wherever he touched. The commentator announced that the giant beast was wounded, and the Candy Cane was attempting to secure the points by climbing me. I swung my tail to shake him off, but he dodged my attack and managed to freeze my tail. I warned Izuku that he needed to engage in combat with the Candy Cane. As the countdown began, the Candy Cane reached my back just as the explosive human burst through a melted section of the wall. I slammed my tail against the ground, shattering the ice that encased it. The explosive human redirected himself toward us as Izuku and the Candy Cane continued their struggle. When the time was finally up, the crowd erupted in cheers. The explosive human fell face first to the ground, and I couldn't help but chuckle. The commentator declared the end of the second round, announcing our victory. I gently wrapped my tail around Izuku, shaking my body furiously to dislodge the Candy Cane. Once he fell off, I transformed back into my human form, momentarily forgetting about 𝐒𝐻𝐸 and 𝐚𝐫𝐲, who were still on my shoulders. As I completed my transformation, I found myself holding them up by their waists, their arms wrapped around my neck. The commentator revealed that Team Midoriya had secured first place once again. I looked down to see a blushing 𝐒𝐻𝐸 and a smiling 𝐚𝐫𝐲. 𝐒𝐻𝐸 shyly asked to be put down, and I complied before rushing over to Izuku, who appeared to be on the verge of tears. I sat in front of him, my tail wagging excitedly. I reminded him of our victory, and he praised my performance. He secured my collar around my neck once more, and I nuzzled against his palm, encouraging him to dry his tears. I offered him a comforting message, reminding him that even in tough times, there are countless reasons to smile. As Izuku's tears flowed, I grew concerned for his well-being, realizing this was the second time he had cried so much. The commentator announced the standings for the other teams, and I watched as Izuku continued to shed tears, worrying about his health. While I tried to comfort him, the candy cane approached us, prompting a low growl from me. Izuku dried his tears, curious about my reaction. The candy cane stood before us, his expression unreadable, and introduced himself, stating he needed to speak with us. We were at one of the entrances with the candy cane, but we weren't alone. The scent of an explosive human lingered just around the corner, yet I remained unfazed. I stood next to Izuku, arms crossed, glaring at the human. Izuku had a firm grip on my leash, but given our close proximity, it wouldn't stop me if I chose to act. Izuku expressed concern about the cafeteria becoming crowded, mentioning that I would be upset if I didn't get a treat. The human continued to stare at Izuku, offering no response. Izuku swallowed nervously, prompting me to use my tail to gently rub his back in an attempt to soothe him. It seemed to work, as his posture relaxed slightly. Shoto revealed that he had been overpowered, breaking his pledge in the process. He took his left hand from his pocket and examined it, reflecting on how none of his friends had felt the same overwhelming force he had. He then suggested that he sensed something similar coming from Izuku, questioning if he was All Might's secret love child. Izuku, flustered, denied it, fumbling over his words in an effort to explain. Shoto pressed on, suggesting that Izuku's reaction indicated a connection between him and All Might that he couldn't discuss. Izuku looked away, realizing he had revealed too much. I contemplated using my tail to resolve the situation, but Izuku had yet to lift his order for me not to harm anyone. Shoto disclosed that Endeavor was his father, the human known for his fiery presence, which felt cold and unwelcoming. He explained that Endeavor had been stuck as the number 2 hero for ages and that if Izuku had something from the number 1 hero, it would give Endeavor even more reason to challenge him. Shoto's glare intensified, but I knew he wouldn't act recklessly with me present. He elaborated on the pressure he faced from his father, who sought to surpass All Might by raising Shoto to be a hero. Shoto's expression turned to one of anger as he recounted painful memories of his mother, who had suffered due to Endeavor's ambitions. He expressed his determination not to become a tool for someone like Endeavor, vowing to win without relying on his father's quirk. As he began to walk away, Izuku slowly released my leash. Shoto dismissed any need for Izuku to explain his connection to All Might, stating he would rise above him using only his right side. Apologizing for wasting our time, he continued on his way. Izuku, feeling compelled to speak, expressed that he had always been supported by others. He stood closer to me, gently grasping my forearm. With a fond look in his eyes, he reflected on how he was there because of the people who had supported him. I responded by affectionately rubbing his head, a gesture he often returned to me. Izuku shared his aspiration to be like All Might, the greatest hero, emphasizing his need to be strong enough to become number 1. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through, catching my attention. Izuku acknowledged that while his motivation might seem trivial compared to Shoto's, he couldn't afford to lose either. He vowed to live up to the hopes of those who supported him, returning Shoto's earlier declaration of war. I wondered if that meant I could take action against Shoto, but Izuku tugged my leash, giving me a light glare before refocusing on the human before us. He declared that he would defeat Shoto as well. The candy cane paused for a moment before walking away, and Izuku released my arm, watching the retreating figure. I asked if we could go to lunch now, and he grabbed my leash, standing on his tiptoes to pat my head. To make it easier for him, I crouched down, allowing him to pet me more easily. Izuku agreed and we moved away from the group of new female humans in the stadium. They were dressed in outfits that seemed unsuitable for combat, performing synchronized movements. Present Mike announced that lunch was over and it was time to reveal the last game. He shared good news for those who didn't make it to the finals, explaining that this was just a sports festival and recreational games were prepared for everyone to participate in. He even mentioned that real cheerleaders from America were there to liven things up. I continued to observe the energetic humans, and when they noticed me staring, several of them turned red, with a few even winking at me. Confused by their gestures, I mimicked them, causing the rest to hide their faces and whisper to one another. Before I could question the strange interaction, Izuku quickly approached and tugged me away from the humans, suggesting we go to another area. We soon found ourselves on the other side of the stadium where everyone was gathering. I sat next to Izuku, playing with the grass, when I caught the familiar sense of Tsu, Mina, and Achiko approaching from behind us. Present Mike teased Class A about their fan service, and I turned to see all the females in our class dressed in the same outfits as the other humans. Nearby, the small human and the electric human exchanged thumbs up, and I noticed a slightly concerning look in the small human's eyes. Momo exclaimed that Mineta and Kaminari had tricked them, and I watched as she fell to her knees, her hands clutching a large bundle of noodles. She lamented about being caught up in Mineta's schemes. Deciding it was time to act, I leapt forward, startling her as I tried to grab the noodles. She moved her hands away, prompting me to pin her arms down. Momo protested, asking me to get off, but I managed to bite into one of the noodles and pull it from her grip before jumping away. The commotion caught the attention of the rest of the class. Achiko warned me not to eat that, trying to pull the noodles from my mouth, but I held on tightly. Someone began to pull at my shoulders, and from the acidic scent, I recognized it was Mina. She informed me that it wasn't food but a pom-pom. I was about to shake them off when Izuku called out to me, and I immediately turned and ran to him, dragging Mina and Achiko along. I stopped in front of Izuku, sitting down and waiting for a treat. Izuku asked me to drop the pom-pom, and I reluctantly spat the noodles out, making him smile as he rubbed my head and praised me. He held a treat in front of me, and I eagerly used my tongue to grab and eat it. Mina and Achiko got up, still disoriented from being dragged. Achiko wondered how I was so obedient to Izuku, who simply smiled at her before giving me one last pat and instructing me to follow him. We gathered in front of a stage where Midnight held a large yellow box. Present Mike announced that it was time to have fun competing in the recreational games, and after that, the 16 finalists would compete in a tournament-style showdown. The thought of one-on-one combat excited me, and I imagined the thrill of the competition. Izuku reminded me that I couldn't kill or severely injure anyone, and I pretended not to hear him, which led him to grab my face and make me look at him. He reiterated his point, and I confirmed that I understood. Midnight then announced they would draw lots to determine the bracket, and I looked at Izuku with eager eyes, wanting to join the games. He rubbed my head and smiled, giving me permission to participate. As the announcement continued, Mashireo, a human with a tail, interrupted, stating he was withdrawing. This surprised us, as it was a perfect chance for competition. Tenya questioned his decision, but Mashireo explained he barely remembered anything from the cavalry battle. I glanced at a human with purple hair, recalling that he had previously declared war on us. I felt a sense of unease, wondering if he had some sort of mental attack. Midnight accepted Mashireo's withdrawal, and the discussion shifted to moving up 2 people from the 5th-place cavalry battle team. A female human with orange hair suggested that instead of them, the ones who fought to the end, Team Tetsu, should take their place. After receiving confirmation from her teammates, she turned back to Midnight, and the decision was made. Midnight announced that Tetsu and Shiozaki had moved up to make 16, and I looked up at the screen to discover who my opponent would be. It was time for the tournament, and the anticipation in the air was palpable. Midnight announced the brackets based on the results of the drawing. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 stood up and focused on the screen to see who their opponent would be. Shinso was set to face Midoriya, but 𝐒𝐮𝐬's eyes shifted to the right, landing on their own name paired with that of their opponent. A smile spread across 𝐒𝐮𝐬's face upon seeing the name of the candy cane, Todoroki. Glancing to the side, 𝐒𝐮𝐬 noticed him glaring back, which only made 𝐒𝐮𝐬's smile widen, revealing sharp teeth. The thrill of competition surged through 𝐒𝐮𝐬. They were eager to engage in battle, but Izuku interrupted with a firm reminder that killing was off the table. 𝐒𝐮𝐬 considered alternatives, suggesting various forms of injury, but each was met with a resolute no from Izuku. Despite 𝐒𝐮's playful persistence, Izuku maintained his serious demeanor, emphasizing the importance of restraint. Just then, Hitoshi appeared, catching Izuku off guard. 𝐒 instinctively wrapped their arms around Izuku protectively, glaring at Hitoshi, who seemed unfazed by the display. As Hitoshi expressed his anticipation for the match, 𝐒's instincts flared with a sense of danger. They quickly covered Izuku's mouth to prevent him from speaking, sensing that Hitoshi posed a threat. Once Hitoshi left, 𝐒 expressed their concerns to Izuku, who nodded in understanding. As the tournament approached, Present Mic announced a brief interlude for recreational activities. While Izuku took a moment to clear his mind, 𝐒 eagerly participated in a scavenger hunt. They picked up a card that read, Grape, and quickly spotted Mineta, who was in distress as 𝐒 attempted to grab one of the ball on his head. The other students ignored Mineta's pleas for help, wary of 𝐒's reputation. After the fun activities, the tournament resumed, and 𝐒 stood beside Izuku, ready for the upcoming match. Present Mic rallied the crowd, emphasizing the seriousness of the battle ahead. 𝐒 reassured Izuku, reminding him of their advice. When nothing is going right, go left. Izuku looked puzzled at first but then smiled, comforted by 𝐒's presence. All Might approached them, slightly out of breath. He noted that 𝐒's fight was not until later and asked how they had arrived. 𝐒 hesitated, recalling a moment when they had been stopped by two pro-heroes at an entrance. In a swift motion, 𝐒 had incapacitated one hero and then dealt with the second, hiding their unconscious bodies in a nearby trash can before continuing to find Izuku. When 𝐒 finally responded to All Might, they simply said they had gotten lost, which earned them a strange look from both All Might and Izuku. All Might then turned to Izuku, inquiring about his progress with One for All, while Izuku expressed his lingering worries. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as the tournament loomed ahead, and 𝐒 was ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Izuku envisioned the microwave and how he would confront the villain, but it still felt uncertain if he didn't concentrate, as if it might all collapse. With his current abilities, even if he succeeded, he would only gain a little more power. All Might explained that, in terms of the previous scale of 0 to 100%, Izuku's body could currently release about 5% of its potential. Hearing this made Izuku feel fortunate to have friends and luck on his side. All Might approached and playfully tapped Izuku on the head. Izuku hissed and instinctively swiped at him, but All Might ducked and offered him a treat. As Izuku savored the delicious snack, a smile spread across his face. All Might patted his head and continued speaking to him, encouraging him to adopt a more determined attitude. The image of the hero Izuku aspired to be felt fragile to All Might, who emphasized that it was during moments of fear or worry that one should embrace a smile. Transforming into his stronger form, All Might gave Izuku a thumbs up, and Izuku stood proudly beside him. All Might reassured him that it was okay to bluff and urged him to stand tall, expressing his high hopes for Izuku. Izuku offered a nervous smile as he turned to face the entrance to the arena. He wanted to stay close to All Might, but All Might attempted to guide him back to the seats. It took considerable strength for All Might to pull Izuku away, and he endured a few scratches in the process. Eventually, All Might carried him to where Tsu, Achiko, and Mina were seated, gently placing him down at their feet. All Might requested the three of them to keep an eye on Izuku, and Mina readily agreed. As All Might walked away, Izuku searched for an empty seat but found none until Uraraka tapped his shoulder and offered her seat, smiling. He nodded in appreciation and settled into the chair, draping his tail over the seat for comfort. In a spontaneous moment, Izuku wrapped his tail around Uraraka's waist and pulled her into his lap, causing her to blush deeply. Mina smirked and leaned closer, whispering something to Uraraka that made her face turn even redder. The announcer, Present Mic, energized the crowd, announcing the start of the highly anticipated finals. The screen displayed images of the competitors, the purple-haired Hitoshi Shinso and a visibly nervous Izuku Midoriya. Present Mike explained the rules, emphasizing that the goal was to force the opponent out of bounds or immobilize them, while also mentioning that Recovery Girl was on standby for any injuries. As the match began, nothing significant happened initially until Shinso provoked Izuku, causing him to charge forward but then abruptly freeze in place. Present Mike noted Izuku's blank expression, questioning if this was Shinso's quirk. Izuku's loyal companion felt a low growl emanate from him, sensing the tension. The crowd gasped as Shinso seemed to have gained the upper hand over Izuku, who was now obediently walking toward the edge of the arena. Uraraka clutched Izuku's tail, growing anxious. Izuku's fingers twitched, and just before he stepped out of bounds, a powerful blast of air erupted, halting him at the last moment. Izuku's fingers were visibly injured, but he had managed to break free from Shinso's control. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Izuku's companion joined in with a small roar. Shinso attempted to regain control, but Izuku remained silent and charged toward him. As Izuku closed the distance, he pushed Shinso toward the edge of the arena, but the purple-haired human retaliated with a punch. Izuku's endurance was commendable as he ignored the pain and continued to push forward, but even a hero could only withstand so much. When Shinso targeted Izuku's injured fingers, he was forced to let go. A loud roar escaped, startling the humans nearby. Ashido began to pat the creature's head while Uraraka scratched its chin in an effort to calm it down. Mina reassured that Midoriya would be all right and urged the creature to calm down. Tsu held out a snack, prompting the creature to open its mouth and use its tongue to grab the treat. As it enjoyed the snack, it imagined it was the bones of the purple-haired human. Gradually, the creature calmed down just in time to see Izuku toss his opponent over his shoulder and out of bounds. Midnight announced that Shinso was out of bounds, allowing Midoriya to advance to round 2. The creature let out another roar as the crowd cheered in response. Izuku was growing stronger. Perhaps one day he would even surpass the creature's strength. As the creature walked toward the entrance of the arena, it had a brief encounter with the candy cane's father, resolving the misunderstanding amicably. Izuku called out to the creature, and it turned around, bursting with happiness at the sight of its king. Izuku stopped in front of it, beaming with a huge smile. He expressed his wishes for good luck in the upcoming match. The creature crouched down, allowing him to pet it. Grateful, the creature acknowledged his support, but it felt confident that this wouldn't be much of a battle. After a moment of bliss, Izuku removed the creature's collar and lifted its head to meet his gaze. He reminded it not to harm or seriously injure its opponent. The creature nodded, satisfied him, and returned the hug, wrapping its arms around his waist. After breaking the hug, Izuku flashed one last smile before heading back toward the stands, cheering for the creature as it turned back to the arena, a small smile transforming into a sinister smirk. Upon reaching the arena, the candy cane was already waiting. The creature climbed the steps as the loud announcer began to speak. Present Mike thanked the audience for their patience and introduced the competitors. The screen displayed an image of the candy cane, devoid of emotion, while the creature's image showed it attacking the camera with fierce intensity. Present Mike declared the creature a primal force of rage and a true warrior, introducing it as Y/N. The crowd erupted in cheers for the creature. Present Mike then introduced the candy cane, Shoto Todoroki, noting his impressive skills, and the crowd cheered for him as well. The creature kept its gaze fixed on Shoto, its tail swishing slowly from side to side. As the match began, the candy cane launched a large wave of ice toward the creature. It reeled back its right arm, morphing it into a blade and swung at the ice wave, shattering it and sending shards flying back at Shoto. With a plan to toss the candy cane out of the arena, the creature charged forward. As it closed in, Shoto recovered and unleashed wave after wave of ice, but the creature dodged with ease. Finally close enough, it leaped at Shoto, but he retaliated with a massive blast of ice, encasing the creature and the area behind it in a thick layer of ice. Focusing its gaze on Shoto, the creature noticed him breathing, half covered in ice. Midnight asked if the creature could move, and it flexed its muscles, causing the ice to crack and shatter. Landing back on its feet, the creature maintained eye contact with Shoto, who wore a shocked expression that quickly turned into a glare. As Shoto raised his hand to freeze the creature again, it seized the opportunity to get behind him and grab his wrist, keeping his hand away while placing its claws near his neck. Leaning down, the creature whispered that if this were a real battle, it would have ended him. Shoto protested, trying to push the creature away with flames engulfing its vision. The fire didn't hurt, but the brightness blinded it momentarily. The candy cane attempted to push the creature out of bounds, but it remained firmly in place, wrapping its tail around Shoto's leg and lifting him into the air. Once its vision cleared, the creature saw Shoto still struggling. It remarked that he was just like the explosive human, refusing to give up. Without letting him respond, the creature used its tail to slam him into the ground repeatedly, not holding back as much this time. As the ground stained from Shoto's face, the creature continued, watching as his limp body hit the ground. The voice of 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼 called for the match to stop, prompting the creature to halt its actions but not before delivering one final slam. Midnight and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼 approached, instructing the creature to release Shoto. Confused about whether the match was over, the creature unwrapped its tail from Shoto's leg and stood up, stretching its limbs. They crouched down and turned the candy cane's body over, revealing his battered face. He was still breathing but remained limp and motionless. The block looked up at Midnight and shook his head, prompting her to rise and raise her arm. Midnight announced that Todoroki was knocked out and that 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼 advanced to the second round. A powerful roar of victory escaped me, though I couldn't consider this a warm-up. The crowd, however, remained silent, their expressions filled with shock. Undeterred, I proceeded to celebrate with a victory dance. Izuku was eager to see how the heroes handled the situation, and he urged 𝐒𝐿/N to join him. 𝐒𝐿/N nodded and moved behind him as they made their way to the front of the crowd. However, a person was blocking Izuku's view, so 𝐒𝐿/N wrapped their tail around his waist, lifted him up, and began to climb the tall buildings. It was easy to hold Izuku while leaping and scaling the structures. Once they reached a good vantage point on a rooftop, 𝐒𝐿/N unwrapped their tail from his waist, allowing him to sit down and watch the battle unfold. Izuku expressed his gratitude, noting that the view was much better than from the street. 𝐒𝐿/N hissed in acknowledgement and lay down beside him, both of them focused on the fight between a hero and a giant villain. The giant was imposing, but it was clear that size alone wouldn't guarantee victory. Izuku recognized the hero, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼, and commented on his impressive performance despite being new to the scene. 𝐒𝐿/N agreed, watching as 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼 skillfully dodged a massive fist with his wooden arm. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼 declared the villain's actions as evil, listing the offenses committed. Izuku pointed out 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐷𝐼's special move, the preemptive binding lacquered chain prison, just as the attack was about to connect. Suddenly, a giant female hero drop-kicked the villain, shouting her attack name, Canyon Cannon. 𝐒𝐿/N noticed several men in the crowd taking pictures of her. The hero introduced herself as Mount Lady, confidently declaring that the threat was neutralized. She struck a pose, drawing even more attention from the crowd, who cheered as they began to disperse. It seemed she was taking all the credit for the victory. Meanwhile, Izuku took out his notebook, muttering to himself as he jotted down observations. He noted Mount Lady's impressive looks and attitude, recognizing her potential as a favorite among the class. However, he also pointed out the challenges she might face navigating the city without causing damage, which could limit her usefulness. 𝐒𝐿/N nudged his shoulder with their head, breaking him from his thoughts. Izuku responded by rubbing 𝐒𝐿/N's head, eliciting a purring sound. Curious, Izuku asked what was on 𝐒𝐿/N's mind. 𝐒𝐿/N gestured toward the sun with their tail, signaling that it was time for him to leave. It took him a moment to understand, but when he did, he realized he was going to be late. He thanked 𝐒𝐿/N for the reminder and quickly put away his notebook, forgetting for a moment that they were on a roof. If 𝐒𝐿/N hadn't wrapped their tail around him, he might have stumbled off the edge. Izuku then asked 𝐒𝐿/N to take him to his school. 𝐒𝐿/N nodded and allowed him to secure himself on their back. With a powerful leap, they jumped from roof to roof, swiftly making their way to 𝐒𝐬𝐷𝐼 Junior High. Victory was indeed sweet.